Hello guys, welcome to Fiction Quest. So in this video, we will see, what if Naruto was sent to Fairy Tail and got married to Erza, Mirajane, and Lucy? If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. The Whirlpool's Arrival. The world ended in a whisper of shattered stone and the taste of ozone. One moment, Naruto Uzumaki was lying in the churning mud of the Valley of the End, his right arm a mangled ruin. His breath a ragged saw in his chest. Across from him, Sasuke Uchiha mirrored his state, a grim tableau of brotherhood and betrayal carved into the very landscape. The war was over. The infinite Tsukuyomi was broken, its ghostly light fading from the moon. A profound, bone-deep weariness had settled over him, heavier than any physical blow. It was the exhaustion of a promise finally kept, a BURDEN carried since childhood finally laid to rest. He had brought his friend home, or what was left of him. The air, however, did not settle. It hummed with a discordant energy, a legacy of Kagaya Otsutsuki's reality-warping power. A tear in space, no larger than his fist, shimmered near the decapitated statue of Madara Uchiha. It was a wound in the world, black and absolute, edged with a violet corona that spat miniature lightning. It began to pull, a gentle tug at first, like a curious tide, plucking at loose pebbles and sucking the mist from the air. Kurama, a silent passenger in his mind for so long, stirred with a jolt of alarm. Naruto, get away from there. That isn't a jutsu. It's wrong. Naruto tried to push himself up, his muscles screaming in protest. His chakra reserves were scraped dry, leaving only the dregs of his own life force and the natural energy he had yet to fully process from the battle. Sasuke saw it too, his single Sharingan widening in alarm. He moved, a pained lurch, to drag himself and Naruto away. But the rift was faster. It expanded with a soundless roar, a vortex of nothingness that devoured light and sound. The pull became a ravenous hunger. It latched onto Naruto, his proximity and the lingering divine energy of the six paths making him an irresistible anchor. Sasuke! Naruto yelled, his voice raw. He shoved his friend with his remaining arm, a desperate, final push. Get back! The force of the shove sent Sasuke skidding back across the slick stone, away from the epicenter. For a heartbeat, their eyes met, one pair the color of a boundless sky, the other a stark abyss of red and black. It was a final, unspoken understanding. Go, live. Then the world dissolved. Naruto felt a sensation like being turned inside out. His senses screamed as reality was shredded and rewoven around him. He saw colors that had no names, heard sounds that were silent, felt the crushing pressure of an entire universe being squeezed through a pinhole. Kurama's roar of fury and fear was the last thing he recognized before consciousness shattered into a million pieces. It was not a journey. It was an annihilation. And then, nothing. Awareness returned slowly, painfully, like sunlight seeping through swollen eyelids. The first thing he registered was the smell. It was rich, loamy, and alive. Damp earth, decaying leaves, the sweet perfume of unfamiliar blossoms. It was cleaner than any forest he had ever known, purer. He drew a breath, and the air itself felt different, thick with an energy that wasn't chakra. It hummed against his skin, a static char. Ge that made the fine hairs on his arms stand on end. He forced his eyes open. A canopy of emerald leaves, impossibly vibrant, formed a mosaic against a sky of the deepest, most startling blue. Sunlight streamed through in hazy, golden columns, illuminating dust motes dancing in the still air. He was lying on a bed of soft moss, his body screaming a litany of protests. Naruto took a mental inventory. His right arm was gone. Not mangled, not destroyed, but utterly absent from the elbow down, the stump bizarrely clean, as if it had been cauterized by a divine fire. The rest of his body was a roadmap of agony. But the wounds from his fight with Sasuke were closed. His tattered orange and black jacket was in shreds, and his pants were torn, but he was alive. He sat up, a groan tearing from his throat. The world tilted violently, and he braced himself with his left hand, his fingers digging into the cool, damp earth. He closed his eyes, focusing, trying to extend his senses. He reached out, for the familiar signatures of his friends, Sakura's steady warmth, Kakashi's crackling energy, Sasuke's cold, flickering flame. There was nothing. He pushed the search wider, stretching his sensory abilities to their absolute limit. A technique honed over years of war. He scanned for the familiar chakra of Konoha, of the land of fire, of the entire continent. He found only emptiness. The world around him was teeming with life. With that strange, humming energy, but the specific frequency of chakra, the lifeblood of his world, was absent. It was like screaming into a void and hearing no echo. The realization hit him not like a Rasengan, but like a slow, creeping poison. This wasn't the elemental nations. The air, the sky, the very energy of the planet, it was all wrong. The rift hadn't just moved him. It had thrown him away. A profound loneliness, colder and sharper than any he had felt as a child, washed over him. He was adrift, an island in an unknown sea. Everyone he had ever fought for, everyone he had ever loved, was gone, a universe away. The victory he had just secured felt hollow, a bitter joke played by a cruel fate. He pushed himself to his feet, his legs shaking. He needed to move. To stay still was to let the despair drown him. He picked a direction at random and began to walk, his steps unsteady, his mind a maelstrom of grief and confusion. He was a shinobi. A shinobi assesses, adapts, and survives. But he wasn't just a shinobi anymore. He was a hero without a home, a savior without a people. He was just Naruto, and for the first time in a very long time, that felt like not enough. The forest was ancient and wild, the trees larger than any he had seen outside of the Shikatsu forest. Strange, brightly colored birds flitted through the canopy, their songs a melody he didn't recognize. He walked for what felt like hours, his body slowly knitting itself back together, the dregs of Kurama's chakra working sluggishly to heal the worst of the damage. The fox himself was silent, a dormant presence in his soul. The dimensional passage had taken a toll on them both. Eventually, the dense woods began to thin, and he stumbled onto a well-worn dirt road. It was a sign of civilization, a beacon of hope in the suffocating wilderness. Hope was a dangerous thing right now, but it was all he had. He followed the road, his gait evening out as his strength slowly returned. He hadn't been walking long when he felt it, a colossal spike of that strange energy, moving towards him at a casual, unhurried pace. It was immense, a veritable mountain of power, yet it felt lazy, undisciplined. It was nothing like the sharp, focused chakra of a master shinobi. This was a wildfire, powerful but untamed. Naruto instinctively tensed, dropping into a low, cautious stance. His eyes narrowed, scanning the road ahead. A figure emerged from the heat haze shimmering above the dirt path. The man was huge, easily towering over Jiraiya, with a wild mane of dark orange hair and a rugged, unshaven jaw. He wore a tattered black cloak with a high collar, his muscular arms and chest exposed, revealing scars and the faint outline of some kind of insignia on his pectoral muscle. A prosthetic arm made of metal and wood gleamed on his left side. The man walked with a rolling, easygoing gait, a carefree grin on his face. He didn't seem to notice Naruto at first. As he drew closer, he yawned, stretched, and then nonchalantly flicked his right hand at a massive boulder that was encroaching on the road. A grid of green light enveloped the rock, and in the next instant, the boulder disintegrated into 1,000 tiny cubes that clattered harmlessly to the ground. Naruto's eyes widened slightly. So that was how this world's power worked. Not a jutsu, not a manipulation of elemental chakra, but some kind of inherent, reality-altering ability. It was potent. The big man finally noticed him, his grin widening. "Whoa there, kid, you look like you've been through the ringer." His voice was a deep, gravelly boom that seemed to vibrate in Naruto's chest. Naruto didn't relax his stance. He said nothing, his mind racing, assessing the man for threats. The man's power was vast, but his posture was open, non-threatening. There was no killing intent, only a lazy, powerful curiosity. The man chuckled, scratching the back of his neck. "Not much of a talker, huh? Can't blame you. Name's Gildarts. I'm just heading back home to Magnolia. You look lost. And, you're missing an arm." He said it with a bluntness that was somehow not unkind. Naruto's gaze flickered down to his own missing limb. Then to Gildart's, prosthetic. A flicker of understanding passed between them. He finally straightened up, letting the tension bleed from his shoulders. This man wasn't an enemy. Naruto, he said, his voice raspy. Naruto. Huh, strange name, Gildarts mused. So, you got a place to go, Naruto. Or are you just wandering? I'm lost, Naruto admitted. The word felt woefully inadequate. He was more than lost. He was untethered from reality itself. Gildarts studied him for a long moment, his cheerful eyes holding a surprising amount of insight. He could feel the power radiating from the kid in waves, a strange, foreign energy that felt both ancient and incredibly potent. But beneath it, he could also sense a profound loneliness and a weariness that no one so young should possess. Well then, Gildarts said with a decisive clap of his hands. Lost is just a step away from being found. My guild, Fairy Tail, is always open to strays. We've got food, drink, and more brawling than you can shake a stick at. Come on, it's better than sleeping in the woods. He turned and started walking, not waiting for an answer, as if it was the most natural thing in the world for Naruto to follow. Naruto hesitated for only a second. He had no other leads, no other options. This man, Gildarts, was the first person in this strange new world to offer him something other than silence. He fell into step behind him. The town of Magnolia was a vibrant, bustling port city, a riot of color and sound that was a world away from the disciplined, militaristic layout of Konoha. Cobblestone stray, ETS wound between buildings of cheerful pastel plaster and dark wood beams. A canal flowed through the center of town, crisscrossed by arched stone bridges. The air smelled of salt from the sea and fresh bread from a nearby bakery. It was peaceful, but the peace was a thin veneer. As they walked, Naruto noticed something odd. The very layout of the main street was bizarrely straight, a perfect linear carved through the otherwise winding town. What happened to this street? Naruto asked, his curiosity piqued. Gildarts chuckled sheepishly. Ah, that's my fault. It's called the Gildarts shift. See, my magic, crash, is a little hard to control. It breaks down anything I touch into its component parts. So, to avoid me accidentally leveling half the town every time I come home, the city reconfigures itself to give me a straight shot to the guild hall. Naruto stared at him, then at the impossibly straight street. He had seen destructive power before. He had wielded it, but to have a power so untamable that an entire city had to rearrange itself for your convenience, that was a different level of absurd. It was also, he had to admit, kind of hilarious. A genuine, small smile took his lips for the first time since he'd woken up. Ahead of them, a massive building loomed, a whimsical fortress of a structure with a high-peaked roof and a massive banner bearing a strange, bird-like crest. This was Fairy Tail. The sound hit them before they were even at the doors, a cacophony of shouting, laughter, explosions, and breaking furniture. It sounded less like a guild hall and more like a full-blown war zone. Gildarts just grinned. Home sweet home. He pushed the massive doors open, and the chaos spilled out like a physical force. Inside, dozens of people were engaged in a massive, guild-wide brawl. A pink-haired young man with a scaly white scarf was breathing fire at a half-naked man who was creating weapons out of ice. A woman in a barrel was chugging from it with gusto. Tables were flying. Magic of every color imaginable was arcing through the air, and at the center of it all, a tiny, ancient man was sitting on the bar, watching the pandemonium with a serene smile. The moment Gildarts stepped through the door, the chaos amplified. Gildarts is back, someone screamed, and the entire guild erupted in a massive cheer. The fighting stopped, replaced by a wave of people rushing to greet the big man. Naruto hung back near the entrance, an silent observer on the edge of a hurricane. The sheer, unadulterated energy of the place was overwhelming. It was louder and more chaotic than even the rowdiest celebration in Konoha, but underneath it all, he could feel a powerful current of camaraderie. This wasn't just a collection of mages. This was a family, a very, very loud and destructive family. In the swirl of bodies, three figures caught his attention. The first was a woman with a gentle, almost beatific smile and long, snow-white hair. She moved with an easy grace, carrying a tray of drinks through the maelstrom as if she were taking a stroll in a park. She seemed to be a point of calm in the storm, her presence soothing. The second was a young woman with stunning scarlet hair, clad in a suit of gleaming steel armor. Her posture was ramrod straight, her expression stern, but her eyes held a fierce, protective light as she surveyed the guild. She radiated an aura of authority and power that was as sharp and unyielding as the sword sheathed at her hip. The third was a blonde girl who seemed more normal than the rest. She was arguing good-naturedly with the fire-breathing boy, a set of keys hanging from her belt. Her energy was bright and cheerful, like a sunny day. Gildarts, having extricated himself from the welcoming mob, gestured for Naruto to come forward. The conversations and laughter died down as dozens of pairs of eyes turned to him. The sudden silence was more intimidating than the noise. He stood there in his tattered clothes, a one-armed stranger from another world. Feeling utterly exposed, the tiny old man hopped down from the bar and approached them. Despite his diminutive stature, he had an immense presence, his gaze ancient and wise. "Gildarts, my boy, welcome home. And who is this you've brought with you?" "Master Makarov," Gildarts said respectfully. "This is Naruto. Found him on the road. He's lost." Makarov's eyes, magnified by his spectacles, roamed over Naruto, taking in the missing arm, the exhaustion etched onto his face, and the quiet, controlled power that hummed beneath his skin. It was an energy unlike any magic he had ever felt. "Welcome to Fairy Tale, Naruto. Any friend of Gildarts is welcome to our hospitality." Before Naruto could respond, the white-haired woman arrived at his side, her smile as warm and inviting as a summer morning. "You look exhausted. Please, sit. Let me get you something to eat and drink." "Thank you," Naruto said, his voice quiet. He let her guide him to a miraculously unbroken table near the edge of the hall. She placed a tall mug of water and a plate piled high with roasted meat and bread in front of him. He hadn't realized how hungry he was until the smell hit him. He began to eat, his movements economical and focused. "My name is Mirajane," she said, her voice soft. "It's a pleasure to meet you." He looked up at her, and in her violet eyes, he saw a genuine kindness. A deep well of empathy that seemed to see past the warrior and into the lonely boy beneath. It was disarming. "Naruto. Thank you for the food, Mirajane." "Of course." She smiled again and moved off to attend to other guild members, leaving him to his meal. He had barely taken a few bites when a shadow fell over his table. He looked up to see the armored, red-haired woman standing before him. Her presence was intense, her brown eyes sharp and analytical as they swept over him. She was assessing him, weighing him, and she was not hiding it. "I am Erza Scarlet," she stated, her voice as crisp and clear as striking steel. "Gildarts brought you here. What is your purpose in Magnolia?" It wasn't a greeting, it was an interrogation. Naruto met her gaze without flinching. He recognized her type instantly. She was a guardian, a shield for her family. Her suspicion was her armor, as much a part of her as the metal she wore. He respected that. "I have no purpose here," he answered honestly, his voice even. "I am, as he said, lost." "Power like yours is never without purpose," Erza countered, her eyes narrowing. She could feel it, the immense potential coiled within him, currently dormant but present. Like a sleeping dragon, it is a weapon, or it is a shield. "Which are you?" Naruto paused, his food forgotten. He considered her question. Weapon or shield? He had been both. He had been a Jinchuriki, a living weapon. And he had been Konoha's shield, the protector of his precious people. What was he now? "I am what I need to be," he said finally. It was the truest answer he could give. Erza's expression didn't change, but he saw a flicker of something in her eyes, not acceptance, but perhaps a grudging respect for the answer. She gave a curt nod and turned, walking away to wreak up a fight that had started between the pink-haired boy and a man with an abundance of piercings. A moment later, the pink-haired boy himself bounced over, a blue, talking cat flying behind him. "Hey, I'm Natsu. You look strong. Fight me," he declared, his fist already wreathed in flames. Before Naruto could even react, the blonde girl from earlier grabbed Natsu by his scarf and yanked him back. "Natsu, stop it. Can't you see he's injured and exhausted? Have some manners." She turned to Naruto with an apologetic smile. "Sorry about him. He tries to fight everyone. I'm Lucy, and this is Happy." Sir," the blue cat chirped. Naruto looked between the fiery, grinning Natsu and the exasperated but friendly Lucy. This place was a whirlwind of personalities, each more intense than the last. Yet, there was an honesty to it he found himself appreciating. There were no masks, no hidden agendas. What you saw was what you got. It's all right, Naruto said to Lucy, a hint of amusement in his tone. I'm used to loud people. He had just started to think he might be able to find a moment of peace when the guild doors slammed open with a loud bang. A group of men stood silhouetted in the doorway, sneering. They were dressed in matching dark leather, their clothes emblazoned with the crest of a snarling, three-headed dog. Well, look what we have here, the leader, a large man with a grotesque scar twisting his lips into a permanent snarl, sneered. The fairies are all gathered in their little hole. Perfect. Makarov's friendly demeanor vanished, replaced by a chilling pressure that filled the room. What is the meaning of this, Iron Hound? You are not welcome here. We're just here for a little fun, old man, the leader chuckled, cracking his knuckles. We've heard fairy tales been getting soft. We're the new top guild in Fury, and we figured we'd start by tearing down this dump and everyone in it. His men laughed, raising their hands as magical energy began to glow around them. Natsu grinned, his fists igniting. Finally, some action. Erza's hand went to her sword. You've made a grave mistake. The entire guild rose as one, a low growl of collective anger rumbling through the hall. But Naruto was already moving. He hadn't planned to. He hadn't wanted to. But these people had shown him a flicker of kindness when he was at his absolute lowest. He was a guest in their home. And these thugs were threatening to burn it down. He wouldn't stand for it. He wasn't at the door. He was simply there. He appeared in front of the Ironhound mages in a blur of motion so fast that only Makarov, Guildarts, and Erza truly tracked it. The rest just saw a flicker of orange and black. The leader of Ironhound blinked, surprised. Who the hell are you, kid? Get out of the way before you get hurt. Naruto didn't speak. He just looked at the man, his blue eyes suddenly as cold and hard as glacial ice. He had seen enough fighting. He was tired of war, of bloodshed, of pointless conflict. He would end this quickly, and without ceremony. One of the mages fired off a blast of purple energy. To the onlookers, it seemed to pass right through Naruto. In reality, he had swayed his body a single, imperceptible inch to the left, the blast missing him by a hair's breadth. He didn't even blink. He took one step forward. His movements were fluid, economical, containing no wasted energy. The leader threw a punch, his fist encased in rock. Naruto slapped the man's wrist aside with his left hand, the block so perfectly timed and placed that it sent a shockwave of pain up the man's arm, shattering his rock armor. Before the man could even register the pain, Naruto's palm connected with his chest. It didn't look like a hard hit. It looked almost casual, but he had pushed a small, precise burst of his own potent life energy, not even true chakra, into the blow. The leader of Ironhound's eyes bulged. He was lifted off his feet and sent flying backwards, not just out of the guild hall, but across the street, where he crashed through the wall of the opposing building with a sound like a thunderclap. Silence. A stunned, absolute silence fell over the guild hall. Everyone, from Natsu to Makarov, stared, dumbfounded. The remaining Ironhound mages gaped in horror at the new hole in the building across the street where their leader had disappeared. They looked back at Naruto, who hadn't even broken a sweat. He just stood there, his expression unreadable. They panicked. They unleashed a volley of spells, fireballs, ice shards, bolts of light, all at once. Naruto moved. He flowed between the attacks like water, a whisper of motion. An ice shard was deflected with the back of his hand, a fireball was sidestepped, a beam of light was avoided with a simple tilt of his head. He wove through the magical barrage and appeared in their midst. A quick jab to a man's throat. A precise chop to another's collarbone. A sweep of his leg that took two more off their feet. He used no jutsu, no Rasengan, no clones. It was pure, unadulterated taijutsu, honed in a war against gods. Each strike was precise, disabling, and non-lethal. Within 5 seconds, the entire group of intruders was lying on the ground, groaning in pain, their limbs twisted at unnatural but unbroken angles. Naruto stood over the last one, who was trembling in terror. He leaned down, his voice a low, dangerous whisper. Get out, and don't come back. The man scrambled to his feet and fled, dragging his fallen comrades with him as fast as he could. Naruto turned back to face the guild. The silence stretched, thick and heavy. Every single mage was staring at him, their expressions a mixture of awe, shock, and a healthy dose of fear. He had just, by himself, with one arm, and without any visible magic, dismantled an entire rival guild in under 10 seconds. Erza's eyes were wide, her hand frozen halfway to her sword. She had seen speed, she had seen strength, but she had never seen that kind of effortless, overwhelming dominance. It was the economy of motion of a true master warrior. Mirajane's ever-present smile had been replaced by a look of profound surprise, her gaze fixed on him with a newfound intensity. Lucis' mouth was hanging open, and even Natsu was too stunned to issue a challenge. Gildarts let out a low whistle. Well, I'll be damned. Makarov's eyes, however, held a different light. He saw past the incredible display of power. He saw the control, the precision. He saw that Naruto had deliberately chosen not to kill, not even to maim. He had neutralized a threat with the minimum force necessary. That spoke more to his character than the power itself. And he saw, once again, the deep, aching loneliness in the boy's eyes as he stood alone in the center of their hall. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the floor, Naruto looked out a large window. The sky was a tapestry of orange and purple, and for a moment, he saw it again, a faint, ethereal shimmer in the upper atmosphere. A ribbon of sickly green light that didn't belong. With it came the hum, a low-frequency vibration that he felt in his bones, in his very soul. It was a discordant note in the symphony of this new world. A whisper of a vast, cold emptiness from a place beyond the stars. He instinctively reached for the natural energy around him, his senses sharpening for a barest fraction of a second. And the feeling intensified tenfold, a hungry, patient, malevolent consciousness, aware of him. He pulled back immediately, his heart pounding. Whatever that was, it was a threat on a level he couldn't yet comprehend. Young man, Makarov's voice cut through his thoughts. Naruto turned. The old master was standing before him, his expression serious. You possess a power I do not understand. And you carry a burden that is plain to see, Makarov said, his voice resonating with wisdom. But you also possess a good heart. You defended this hall. You defended this family, even though it is not your own. He gestured around the room, at the stunned faces of his children. This is a chaotic, destructive, and often foolish place. But it is a home. And in fairy tale, we look after our own. No one should have to be alone. He looked Naruto directly in the eye. I don't know where you came from, son. But I know that you have a place here, if you want it. Naruto looked at the old master. He looked at Gildarts, who gave him a thumbs up. He saw Erza, her suspicion now mingled with a grudging respect. He saw Lucis' awestruck but friendly face. And he saw Mirajane, her gentle smile having returned. This time filled with a deeper understanding. He thought of Konoha. He thought of his team, of his teachers, of the family he had fought and bled and nearly died to protect. They were gone, a universe away. He could never go back. The crushing weight of that truth settled in his chest. But here was a chance for something new. A place to rest, a place to heal, a place to belong. A single tear traced a path through the grime on his cheek. He wiped it away with the back of his hand. I accept, he said, his voice thick with emotion. A grin split Makarov's face. Excellent. Mirajane, the stamp. Mirajane beamed and hurried over with the guild's insignia stamp and a pad of ink. Where would you like it? And what color? Naruto looked at his remaining arm, then the empty space where his other should have been. He thought of the orange swirl on the back of his jacket, the symbol of his clan, of his parents. He held out his left shoulder. Orange, he said, if you have it. Mirajane smiled warmly and pressed the stamp firmly against his skin. When she pulled it away, the fairy tale crest, in a vibrant, hopeful orange, was emblazoned on his shoulder. It felt right. A deafening cheer erupted through the guild hall, shaking the very foundations. Natsu was the first to reach him, slinging an arm around his shoulders. All right, our new mystery powerhouse. This is gonna be awesome. The rest of the guild swarmed him, clapping him on the back, offering him drinks, welcoming him not as a stranger, but as one of their own. for the first time since he had arrived in this strange, new world. Naruto Uzumaki felt the faintest glimmer of a new dawn. He was still lost, still broken, but he was no longer alone. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. Bonds of Steel and Kindness. A month passed in a blur of riotous noise, clashing mugs, and the ever-present threat of a stray chair flying past one's head. Naruto found a strange rhythm in the chaos of the fairy tale guild hall. He was an anomaly, a quiet island in a sea of joyful pandemonium. He'd learned the guild's unspoken rules. Natsu would challenge him to a fight at least twice a day, which Naruto would end by simply placing a hand on the Dragon Slayer's head and holding him in place until he ran out of fire. Gray would inevitably lose his clothes, a fact that no longer even registered as strange, and Kana would drink everyone under the table. A feat he found both impressive and slightly terrifying. He was a fixture, yet a mystery. He took small, local jobs that required minimal fuss, retrieving lost items, dealing with minor beasts in the woods, enough to earn his keep but not enough to draw undue attention. He rarely spoke of his past, and the guild, in their own boisterous way, respected his silence. They sensed the immense weight he carried. They didn't need to know the details, it was enough that he was one of them now. The orange guild mark on his shoulder was a silent declaration of belonging. Lucy would often seek him out, plopping down at his usual quiet corner table to complain about Natsu's latest antics or to excitedly show him a new celestial spirit she could summon. He listened patiently, offering quiet advice on how to better sync her own magical energy with her spirits, an insight that came naturally to someone who had spent a lifetime harmonizing with a being of pure energy. Theirs was an easy, uncomplicated friendship. His interactions with Erza were more formal, laced with a professional courtesy that was both her nature and a product of her lingering caution. She observed him during guild brawls, her sharp eyes cataloging his movements, his effortless deflections, his complete lack of wasted motion. She saw a warrior of a caliber she had never encountered, and that level of unknown power, even in an ally, kept her on guard. It was with Mirajane that he found a different kind of connection. She never pressed him for details, never asked him to fight or prove himself. She simply made sure his mug was never empty and his plate was never bare. Sometimes, when the guild quieted down in the late hours of the night, she would polish glasses behind the bar while he sat, lost in thought. "A lonely sky is still the sky," she said to him once, her voice as soft as velvet. He looked up, startled from his reverie. "What?" She offered him that gentle, all-knowing smile. "Your eyes. They look like a sky that's had all its stars stolen. But the sky is still there. It's just waiting for a new dawn." Naruto had no response to that. He just watched her, a strange warmth spreading through his chest. She saw him. Not the powerhouse who dismantled a dark guild in seconds, not the mysterious stranger, but the broken man underneath. It was both unnerving and deeply comforting. The fragile piece of his new routine was shattered on a Tuesday morning. As usual, Natsu was attempting to engage him in a fight, and as usual, Naruto was ignoring him, trying to enjoy a bowl of ramen Mirajane had somehow learned to make for him. It wasn't Ichiraku's, but it was a taste of a home he could never see again, and he cherished it. Master Makarov, perched on the second-floor railing, cleared his throat, his voice booming over the din. "Listen up, you brats." The guild fell into a rare, momentary silence. "We've received a special request, S-class difficulty," Makarov announced, holding up a mission flyer. "The village of Argentum, high in the northern mountains, is in trouble. Their people are falling ill with a mysterious ailment that seems to be draining them of their magical power, and in some cases, their very life force. The village is known for its unique crystal resonance magic, which has ceased to function entirely. They need someone to investigate the source and neutralize the threat." A low murmur went through the assembled mages. An enemy you could punch was one thing. A mysterious, magic-draining plague was another entirely. "This mission requires a delicate touch as much as it requires power," Makarov continued, his gaze sweeping the room before landing squarely on his most reliable knight. "Erza, you will lead this investigation." Erza, Santa, Nding straight and tall near the request board, nodded sharply. "Understood, Master." However, Makarov added, his eyes shifting, finding Naruto in his quiet corner. "You will not be going alone." Naruto will accompany you. The quiet in the hall was of a different kind now. It was thick with surprise. Naruto was strong, everyone knew that, but he was still the new guy, an unknown quantity. Pairing him with Erza, the guild's most disciplined and structured mage, was an unexpected choice. Naruto himself looked up from his ramen, his expression unreadable. He hadn't taken a high-stakes mission yet. He hadn't been sure he was ready. Erza turned, her gaze locking with his across the room. There was no animosity in her eyes, only a cool, professional assessment. Master, are you certain? We know nothing of his capabilities in a situation like this. I am certain, Makarov said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Your strategic mind and Naruto's unique perspective will be necessary for this. The fee is substantial. More importantly, a village is dying. Prepare to leave within the hour. With that, he disappeared into his office. Erza gave Naruto one last, searching look before turning on her heel. Meet me at the East Gate in 1 hour. Be prepared for mountain travel. Do not be late. Her voice was a commander's, crisp and authoritative. Naruto watched her go, then slowly finished his ramen. He could feel the eyes of the guild on him. This was a test, not just of his power, but of his place in fairy tale. The train ride to the base of the northern mountains was a study in tense silence. Natsu's debilitating motion sickness meant that fairy tale mages often opted for other means of travel, but for a journey of this distance, the railway was the most efficient. Erza had packed a mountain of luggage. Her various armors and weapons magically stored in oversized trunks that took up an entire bench. She sat perfectly upright, her hands folded in her lap, her gaze fixed on the passing scenery. Naruto sat opposite her, with nothing but the tattered clothes on his back. He didn't need supplies. He didn't need a change of clothes. He was a self-contained weapon, a survivor who had learned to live off the land in the crucible of war. The silence stretched between them, thick and awkward. You do not seem concerned, Erza said finally, her voice cutting through the rhythmic clatter of the train wheels. About what? This mission. A magic-draining sickness. It is a threat unlike any we have faced before. It could render us powerless. Her brow was furrowed with worry, not for herself, but for the potential failure of the mission and the fate of the villagers. Worrying doesn't change the outcome, Naruto replied simply, his eyes closed as he focused on the world outside. He was extending his senses, feeling the flow of natural energy, getting a baseline for what this land should feel like before they entered the affected area. We'll get there, we'll assess the situation, and we'll deal with it. Quote, his calmness seemed to irritate her. This is not a simple brawl in the guild hall, Naruto. This is a matter of life and death. Your cavalier attitude is unsettling. It's not cavalier, he corrected, opening his eyes to meet her gaze. His blue eyes were steady, devoid of arrogance. It's focus. Panicking about what might happen distracts from what is happening. Right now, the train is moving. The sun is shining. The threat is still hours away. I'll deal with it when it's in front of me. Erza fell silent, considering his words. It was the logic of a soldier. Of someone who had lived in a constant state of conflict. It was a philosophy born from a harsh reality, and while it was alien to her own meticulous planning, she couldn't entirely dismiss it. The rest of the train ride passed in silence. When they finally disembarked at a small, dusty outpost, the true journey began. The climb into the mountains was arduous, the air growing thin and cold. Erza, clad in a practical traveling outfit she had re-equipped into, moved with a steady, determined pace. Naruto followed a few steps behind, his breathing even, his single hand tucked into his pocket. He seemed completely unaffected by the altitude. He kept pausing, tilting his head as if listening to something she couldn't hear. What is it? She asked after the third time he stopped, her hand instinctively resting on the hilt of her sword. The animals, he said quietly. There are none. No birds, no insects, no tracks. This forest is silent. It's not natural. Erza strained her own senses. He was right. The woods were unnervingly still. It was a detail she had missed in her focus on reaching the objective. His awareness operated on a different plane than hers. She was trained to spot tactical threats. He seemed to feel the very pulse of the world around him. As they crested the final ridge, the village of Argentum came into view, nestled in a high mountain valley. It should have been beautiful. The buildings were crafted from a unique, luminous crystal that was supposed to glow with a soft inner light. But now, the crystals were dull and gray, like cataracts on a blind eye. A pall of lethargy hung over the entire village. They were met by the village elder, a frail old woman who leaned heavily on a twisted crystal staff. Her face was a mask of despair. Fairy tale. Thank the stars. We are desperate. Erza immediately took charge, her voice calm and reassuring. I am Erza Scarlet. This is Naruto. Please, tell us everything. When did the sickness begin? What are the symptoms? As the elder recounted the tale, a creeping weakness that started 2 weeks ago, mages finding themselves unable to perform even the simplest spells, the vibrant crystals of the village fading to lifeless stone. Naruto walked away from the discussion. Erza shot him an annoyed look, but he paid it no mind. He walked to the center of the village, where a large, ornate crystal spire stood, now dark and inert. He placed his left palm against its cool surface. He closed his eyes, shutting out the world, and focused inward. He reached out, not with chakra, but with the pure natural energy he had learned to command in sage mode. He let his senses sink into the crystal, following the lines of energy deep into the earth beneath the village. He felt it instantly. The natural energy of the valley was sick. It was sluggish, contaminated by a foreign presence that was acting like a parasite, drinking from the source. And the connection was strongest in one direction, towards the main mine, the heart of the village's crystal magic. He pulled his hand back and walked back to Erza and the elder just as Erza was asking, have there been any unusual visitors? Any strange occurrences before the sickness began? No, nothing at all. The elder lamented. It was as if a shadow fell over us overnight. The problem isn't in the village, Naruto stated, his voice cutting through their conversation. It's in the mine. Erza turned to him, her eyebrows raised. How can you be so certain? We have not yet gathered all the facts. The energy is being leached from a single point, he explained, gesturing towards the mountain looming over them. The entire valley is connected by a network of these crystals underground. The source is in the largest deposit. In the mine. That's where we need to go. His certainty was absolute. The elder looked from him to Erza, her expression hopeful. Erza hesitated for only a moment. Her methods were thorough, step by step. His was an intuitive leap based on a sense she couldn't comprehend. But his logic, based on his earlier observation about the silent forest, was sound. The land itself was affected. Very well, she said with a decisive nod. Lead the way. The entrance to the Argentum mine was a dark, gaping maw in the mountainside. The moment they stepped inside, the effect was palpable. It was a physical pressure, a draining sensation that immediately began to sap at their strength. Erza grunted, feeling a wave of dizziness. The magical power that was always a roaring fire within her was reduced to a flickering candle. My magic, she breathed, her voice tight. It's being suppressed. She tried to requip, and the flash of light that usually accompanied her armor change was slow and sputtering. She managed to summon her Heaven's Wheel armor, but it felt heavy, sluggish. Naruto, however, seemed largely unaffected. He felt the drain, a persistent, annoying pull on his own energy, but his reserves were so vast, so fundamentally different from the Ethernano that mages used, that the effect was minimal. It was like trying to empty an ocean with a teaspoon. Stay close, he said, his voice low. His senses were on high alert. The MMING he had felt on his first day in this world, the whisper of the cosmic threat, was absent here. This was something different, something hungry. They delved deeper into the mine, following the main tunnel. The air grew colder, heavier. The crystal veins that lined the walls were completely dark. Erza found her breathing becoming labored. Each step took a conscious effort. Her reliance on her magic was so complete that having it stifled was like losing a limb. She was still a master swordswoman, but her strength, her speed, her very essence as a mage was being leached away. The dynamic between them had inverted. On the outside, she was the confident leader, he the quiet subordinate. Here, in the suffocating darkness, he was the pillar of strength, his presence a steady, unwavering beacon. He walked with a calm purpose, his senses painting a clear picture of the tunnels ahead. They reached a massive central cavern, and the source of the sickness became terrifyingly clear. In the center of the cavern, fused to the heartstone, a crystal deposit the size of a house, was a creature from a nightmare. It was a massive, geode-like entity, its outer shell a mass of dull, parasitic crystals. Pulsating veins of sickly purple light ran across its surface, pumping energy from the heartstone into its core. It had no eyes, no mouth, just a raw, silent hunger. As they entered, smaller crystalline shards detached from its body, forming into crude, four-legged constructs that skittered towards them, their movements jerky and unnatural. "My word," Erza whispered, her eyes wide. "It's a parasite," Naruto said, his gaze fixed on the central creature. "It's latched onto the main vein and is drinking the magic from the entire valley." The crystal constructs charged. Erza, despite her weakness, moved to intercept them. Her sword's a blur. She cut one down, but the effort cost her. She stumbled, panting. The air in the cavern was thick with the draining effect. "Erza, fall back," Naruto commanded, his voice sharp. He moved in front of her, a solid wall between her and the constructs. "You're too weak here. I'll handle them." He created a dozen shadow clones in a series of silent puffs of smoke. The clones surged forward, engaging the crystal soldiers in a chaotic melee of orange and black. While his clones fought, the real Naruto studied the main creature. It was drawing power from the heartstone, and its hide looked incredibly dense. A brute force attack might not be enough. The creature at the center of the cavern seemed to sense him as the greater threat. A point of intense purple light gathered at its core, and it fired a massive beam of pure, siphoned magical energy directly at him. Naruto didn't dodge. He held up his left hand, his palm open. A swirling sphere of chaotic, destructive energy formed in an instant, the Rasengan. He met the beam head-on. The collision was immense, a deafening roar of conflicting energies that shook the entire cavern. For a moment, Naruto was pushed back, his feet carving trenches in the stone floor. The raw power of the beam, composed of the stolen magic of an entire valley, was incredible. But Naruto's power was his own. He roared, pushing more of his own energy into the sphere. The Rasengan tore through the beam, drilling a path straight to the creature. It slammed into the entity's crystalline shell, shattering a large section and earning a silent, pained pulse of light from the beast. Erza watched, her breath catching in her throat. The sheer density and power of his attack was beyond anything she had ever witnessed. It was not magic as she knew it. It was something more primal, more fundamental. The creature, wounded, let out a psychic shriek that vibrated through the rock. It began to draw on the heartstone with even more fervor, the cracks in its shell quickly repairing themselves. "It's regenerating," Erza yelled, forcing herself to her feet. "As long as it's connected to the heartstone, we can't do enough damage." Naruto dispelled his clones, his mind racing. She was right. He could keep blasting it all day, but it would just heal. He needed to sever its connection. But the creature's hide was too thick, and he couldn't get close enough without being bombarded by its energy attacks. He needed a distraction, an opening. He looked back at Erza. She was weakened, barely able to stand, but her eyes were sharp, her mind clear. She was analyzing the creature, her gaze tracking the flow of energy from the crystal to the pulsing core. In that moment, he understood. He had the power, but she had the eyes. "Tell me where to hit," he said, his voice a low growl of determination. A spark of understanding lit Erza's eyes. The earlier tension between them, the uncertainty, it all evaporated, burned away by the heat of battle. They were two warriors with a single purpose. A nod was all the confirmation she needed. Its energy flow is cyclical. She called out, her voice ringing with renewed authority despite her weakness. There is a 3-second interval where it diverts all its power to regeneration. The main conduits are on its underside, where it connects to the heartstone. You need to strike there. Right after it fires its main weapon. "Got it," Naruto replied. He created 2 clones. "Buy me a second." The clones shot off in opposite directions, drawing the creature's attention and the attacks of the smaller constructs. The main beast began to gather energy for another beam attack, its core glowing ominously. "Get ready," Erza shouted. "It's preparing to fire." Naruto hunkered down, pouring natural energy into his legs. The air around him crackled. The beam erupted from the creature, aimed at one of the clones. "Now!" Erza screamed. Naruto exploded from his position. He was a blur of orange. moving so fast he was barely a flicker. He ran up the beam itself, the raw energy scorching the soles of his feet, and used it as a bridge to the creature's main body. In his hand, he formed a new Rasengan, this one larger, more violent, infused with the natural energy of Sage Mode. The Great Ball Rasengan. He reached the creature's massive form and, following Erza's direction, dove underneath it. Just as she'd predicted, pulsating, vein-like conduits were pumping energy from the heartstone into the creature's body. He slammed the massive Rasengan directly into the central nexus. The result was catastrophic. The creature's psychic scream was one of pure agony as the Rasengan ripped its connection to the heartstone to shreds. The siphoning effect across the valley vanished in an instant. The creature, cut off from its power source, began to crumble, its crystalline body breaking apart into dust and inert rock. As the last of the creature disintegrated, the heartstone, and every other crystal in the cavern, flared to life, bathing the cavern in a soft, warm glow. The oppressive, draining feeling was gone, replaced by a vibrant, thrumming energy. Erza sagged against the cavern wall, the return of her magic flooding her system almost painfully. She looked at Naruto, who stood panting in the center of the cavern, his single hand still smoking slightly from the force of the jutsu. He had done it. No, they had done it. He walked over to her and, without a word, offered his left hand. She looked at it for a moment, then at his face. The coldness she had sometimes seen in his eyes was gone, replaced by the warmth of a shared victory. She took his hand, and he easily pulled her to her feet. "Your strategy was flawless," he said, a note of genuine admiration in his voice. "Your power is astonishing," she replied, her voice filled with a respect that bordered on awe. They stood there for a moment in the glowing cavern, a new understanding passing between them. The friction was gone, reforged into a bond of mutual respect, a partnership forged in the heat of a desperate battle. The journey back was different. The silence was no longer tense, but comfortable. They spoke of the fight, dissecting it, a habit of true warriors. When they returned to Argentum, they were greeted as heroes. The villagers were already regaining their strength, the crystals of their homes once again glowing with a soft, beautiful light. Later that night, back in the guild hall, the victory was celebrated with typical fairy tale fervor. Naruto, however, found his usual corner. The noise a little too much after the intensity of the mission. Mirajane approached, placing a steaming bowl of ramen in front of him. "I heard you two worked well together," she said, her smile gentle and knowing. Naruto glanced over at Erza, who was, impossibly, forcing Natsu and Gray into a formal apology for knocking over her strawberry cake. A small, genuine smile touched his lips. "Yeah, we did. I'm glad," Mirajane said softly. "It's good to see you connecting with people." She looked at him, her violet eyes full of a depth that always seemed to pierce through his defenses. "Are you all right, Naruto? You seem distant, even now." He considered her question, the easy honesty she always offered inviting the same from him. "Just tired. It was a long day." She nodded, sensing he wasn't ready to share more. As she turned to leave, his eyes fell upon a newspaper someone had left on the bar. It was a copy of the Weekly Sorcerer. A small, buried article on an inside page was titled, "Aster. Anomical Anomalies Baffle Fury Observatory." It detailed unexplained energy readings and faint, aurora-like lights being detected in the upper atmosphere, which scientists were dismissing as unusual but natural solar activity. Naruto's smile faded. He lightly touched the newspaper, and he could feel it, faint but unmistakable. The same discordant, unnatural hum that he felt in his very soul. The wrongness. The creature in the mine had been a parasite, but it had felt like a part of the natural order, twisted as it was. This was different. This was the whisper of the void. He looked up from the paper, his gaze distant. And he knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that the parasite they had just fought was not the true sickness threatening this world. It was merely a symptom. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. Celestial Keys and a Fading Star. The quiet corner of the guild hall had become Naruto's sanctuary, but Lucy Heartfilia was becoming a persistent, and not entirely unwelcome, disruption to his solitude. She had a brightness about her that was hard to ignore, an earnest determination that reminded him, painfully at times, of a certain pink-haired kunoichi from his past. He found her one afternoon not at the guild, but in a small, grassy training field on the outskirts of Magnolia. She was standing in a magic circle of her own design, her brow furrowed in concentration, her hands clutching a single, ornate silver key. Sweat beaded on her forehead as she poured her magical energy into it, chanting an incantation. A faint, sputtering light emanated from the key before fizzling out with a pathetic pop. Lucy let out a groan of pure frustration, slumping to the ground. Useless. Why can't I get it to work? Naruto had been watching from the shade of a nearby tree. Having sensed her spiking and then collapsing magical signature, he walked over, his footsteps soft on the grass. Talking to your keys now. Lucy yelped, scrambling to her feet. Naruto, don't sneak up on a person like that. And I wasn't talking to it, I was encouraging it. He picked up the silver key she had dropped. It was intricately carved with the symbol of the constellation Kylum, the chisel. It felt cold and inert in his hand. This is a new one. It's supposed to be, she sighed, plopping back down onto the grass. I got it on my last solo job. But I can't form a contract. I can't even get the gate to open. It's like the spirit on the other side is just ignoring me. She looked down at her hands, a familiar wave of self-doubt washing over her face. Maybe I'm just not strong enough. Naruto crouched down to her level, examining the key. He didn't understand the mechanics of celestial spirit magic, the contracts and the gates. But he understood connections. He understood energy. He had spent his entire life forging a bond with a being of immense, hostile power, transforming it from a source of fear and hatred into a partnership. It's not about strength, he said, his voice quiet but firm. You're thinking about it like a tool. You put magic in, you expect a result. But it's not a tool. It's a handshake. The spirit on the other side has to be willing to shake your hand. Lucy looked up, intrigued. What do you mean? When you try to summon, what does it feel like? He asked, ignoring her initial question. It feels like I'm pushing against a locked door, she explained. I pour my magic in, and it just hits a wall. Exactly. You're trying to kick the door down, he said. He handed the key back to her. Don't push. Listen. Close your eyes. Hold the key. Don't try to force the gate open. Just feel it. Feel the spirit on the other side. Introduce yourself. Not with words, but with your energy. Let it know who you are, what you're about. It's a conversation, not a command. His words were strange, esoteric, so different from the formal teachings she'd read in books. But there was a deep, unshakable confidence in his voice. She looked from his Nest face to the key in her hand and decided to try. She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath to calm her racing heart. She held the key in both hands, not as a conduit for her power, but as a link. She stopped pushing her magic into it and instead, did as he said. She listened. At first, there was nothing. Just the feel of the cool metal in her palm. Then, slowly, a faint, almost imperceptible vibration. A flicker of stubborn, willful energy from beyond the gate. It felt impersonal, mechanical, and deeply resistant. Hello, she thought, projecting her own feelings into the key. My name is Lucy. I'm a member of Fairy Tale. I believe in my friends. I want to get stronger to protect them. That's why I need your help. She didn't force the sentiment. She just let it flow, an honest and open declaration of her intent. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, the resistance wavered. The stubborn energy on the other side was replaced by a flicker of curiosity. The door wasn't unlocked, but she could feel a keyhole now. A place to connect. Taking a steadying breath, she stood up, held the key aloft, and spoke the words, not as a command, but as an invitation. Open. Gate of the Chisel. Kylum. This time, there was no sputtering. A brilliant column of silver light erupted from the key, and the gate opened with a resonant chime. Hovering in the air before her was a strange, spherical, robotic being with a single large eye and a sharp, pointed drill-like appendage. The spirit, Kylum, floated silently for a moment, its red eye glowing. Then it spoke, its voice a monotone, synthesized sound. Subject. Lucy Heartfilia. Energy signature matched with declaration of intent. Contract parameters. Acceptable. I am Kylum. I will lend you my power. Lucy's jaw dropped. It had worked. She turned to Naruto, her eyes shining with a mixture of shock and elation. I did it. You were right. Naruto just smiled. You did it. I just reminded you how. Kylum swiveled its single eye to look at Naruto. Unidentified energy source detected. Non-ethernano. High density. Nature. Anomalous. Threat level. Indeterminate. Hey, be nice. Lucy chided, feeling a rush of proprietary affection for her new spirit. This is Naruto. He's my friend. He's the one who helped me reach you. Kylum's eye blinked once. Friendship. An illogical but frequently observed variable. Acknowledged. The spirit then dissipated in a shower of silver light, the gate closing behind it. Lucy threw her arms around Naruto in a spontaneous, ecstatic hug. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I've been trying for weeks. Naruto froze for a second, unused to such casual, exuberant affection. Then he relaxed, patting her awkwardly on the back with his one hand. Anytime, Lucy. She pulled back, her face flushed with excitement. His advice had not only worked, it had opened up a whole new way of thinking about her magic. He saw a potential in her that she often struggled to see in herself, and his quiet belly. EF was more encouraging than any loud cheer. In that moment, her simple, friendly admiration for the quiet powerhouse of their guild began to blossom into something deeper, something warmer. Their training became a semi-regular event. Naruto's insight into energy and connection was a perfect complement to Lucy's contractual magic. He helped her improve her bond with all her spirits, not through raw power, but through understanding and harmony. During one of their sessions, as Lucy was attempting to hold two gates open at once, a familiar, chaotic whirlwind descended upon their quiet training field. Lucy, Naruto, I'm all fired up and I found us a job. Natsu Dragneel yelled, skidding to a halt in front of them with happy flying in circles around his head. He waved a mission request form under their noses. Natsu, what have I told you about personal space? Lucy sighed, dismissing her spirits. Yeah, but look at this one. Natsu insisted, his grin wide and infectious. Retrieve the Nocturne Locket, a stolen family heirloom. From a group of dark mages hiding out in the old Belial estate. The reward is 100,000 jewel. Think of all the food we can buy. Aye, sir, and fish. Happy added. Lucy took the flyer and read it. It seemed straightforward enough. A simple retrieval mission. And the pay was good. Her rent was due soon. All right, I'm in. What about you, Naruto? A change of pace from all this, listening. Naruto glanced at the request. He hadn't intended to go on a mission, but the idea of spending the day with Lucy, and, he supposed, Natsu, was more appealing than sitting alone in the guild hall. Sure, why not? The Belial estate was a crumbling Gothic mansion a few hours outside of Magnolia, perched on a cliff overlooking a stormy sea. It was a place of faded grandeur and creeping decay. The perfect cliché hideout for a group of up-and-coming dark mages. I've got a bad feeling about this place, Lucy whispered, clutching her keys as they crept through the rusted iron gates. Awesome. That's how you know it's gonna be a good fight. Natsu cheered, punching his flaming fist into his palm. Naruto said nothing, his senses spreading out, mapping the decrepit mansion. The energy signatures were weak, arrogant. A handful of mages, nothing to be concerned about. But there was something else. A faint, cloying energy signature coming from the heart of the mansion. It was a cold, alien feeling. And it put him on edge. They kicked in the main doors and were met by a group of 6 mages clad in dark robes, their leader a sneering man with slicked back hair and a superiority complex. Fairy tale. I should have known you'd stick your noses where they don't belong. No matter. The Black Vulture Guild will make a name for itself by crushing some of Fiore's most famous pests. Never heard of you, Natsu said flatly, before launching himself forward with a roar of Fire Dragon's Iron Fist. The fight devolved into a typical fairy tale brawl. Natsu was a whirlwind of fire and fury, taking on 3 of the mages at once. Lucy summoned Taurus, whose brute strength easily handled 2 more. Naruto stayed back, a silent guardian, watching the flow of the battle, ready to intervene if needed. The leader, seeing his grunts being effortlessly dismantled, sneered and backed away towards a large, ornate pedestal in the center of the room. On it rested a silver locket, shaped like a crescent moon and inlaid with a polished piece of obsidian. You fools think this is a simple retrieval, he gloated, grabbing the locket. This is a weapon of immense power. He channeled his magic into the artifact, and the obsidian stone began to glow with a sickly, violet light. The moment the locket activated, Naruto felt it. It was the hum, the same discordant, soul-chilling frequency he had sensed from the sky, the same wrongness from the newspaper article, but concentrated, focused, and weaponized. A wave of nauseating energy washed over the room. It wasn't an attack that destroyed. It was one that warped. Colors bled at the edges, sounds became distorted and sharp, and a profound sense of vertigo and disorientation filled the air. Lucy cried out, clutching her head as her connection to Taurus snapped shut. The world had become a swirling, incomprehensible mess. Natsu stumbled, his dragon slayer senses thrown into chaos by the sensory assault. "What is this?" he roared, shaking his head as if to clear it of water. The Black Vulture leader laughed, seemingly immune to the effect. The Nocturne Locket scrambles the senses. It floods the mind with chaotic energy, making it impossible to focus, impossible to use your magic. Now, perish. He raised a hand, forming a blade of dark energy to strike down the disoriented Lucy. Naruto's eyes narrowed. The sensory chaos was affecting him too. But his mental discipline, forged through years of meditation and the crucible of war, allowed him to find a point of stillness in the storm. He saw the leader moving towards Lucy, and his protective instincts took over with a cold, absolute fury. He had already lost one world. He would not stand by and watch his new friends be destroyed in another. He took a single step, and the air around him changed. The ground beneath his feet cracked. He raised his left hand, and from the empty space above his palm, a sphere of utter blackness materialized. It was no larger than a fist, a perfect orb of absolute nothingness that seemed to drink the very light from the room. Then, with a thought, the sphere elongated, forming a simple, elegant black staff about 6 feet long. It was a truth-seeking orb, a manifestation of the divine power of the 6 paths, something he hadn't been forced to use since his final battle. The moment the staff formed, the chaotic energy from the locket that touched it was simply erased, nullified. The Dark Mage leader stopped his attack, his eyes widening in shock and fear at the sight of the impossible object. What is that?" Naruto didn't answer. He blurred forward, the black staff held in a simple grip. He moved through the sensory distortion as if it wasn't there. The leader swung his dark energy blade in a panic. Naruto met the attack with the staff. There was no clang of impact. The energy blade simply ceased to exist upon contact with the black orb at the tip of the staff. The leader's face was a mask of terror. Before he could react, Naruto spun, the other end of the staff striking the man's wrist with a sickening crack. The Nocturne Locket flew from his grasp. With a final, fluid motion, Naruto jabbed the leader in the solar plexus with the staff's blunt end. The man's eyes rolled back into his head, and he crumpled to the floor, unconscious. The moment the leader was knocked out, the locket's effect ceased. The world snapped back into focus. Naruto let the black staff dissolve back into nothingness, the display of power lasting no more than a few seconds. He rushed to Lucy's side, his expression a mixture of anger and concern. "Lucy, are you all right?" She was on her knees, shaking, but she looked up at him, her eyes wide with awe. She had seen the whole thing through the disorienting haze, the black sphere. The impossible staff, the way he had moved with a grace and power that seemed utterly divine. It was a level of existence beyond S-class, beyond anything she had ever imagined. He hadn't just defeated the enemy. He had casually negated his power as if it were a child's tantrum. "I'm okay," she breathed, her heart pounding in her chest. "Naruto, what was that?" "Just a trick I know," he said evasively, helping her to her feet. Natsu, having shaken off the last of the disorientation, came jogging over, his eyes sparkling. "Whoa, that black stick was awesome. You gotta teach me that." Naruto just shook his head, a small smile returning to his face as the immediate danger passed. He walked over and picked up the Nocturne Locket. In his hand, it felt cold, alien. The hum of the void was now dormant within it. A sleeping serpent. He had his first tangible link to the threat he had been sensing since his arrival. Back in Lucy's apartment that evening, the mood was quiet. Natsu and Happy had celebrated their victory by buying out a local fish market and had gone off to feast. Lucy had insisted Naruto come back with her for tea, a quiet thank you for his actions at the estate. She handed him a warm mug, her fingers brushing his. You saved me today. Again. We're a team, he said simply, taking the mug. We look out for each other. I know, but that wasn't just teamwork, she said, looking him directly in the eyes. That power you used, it felt different. Ancient. It wasn't magic, was it? Naruto looked out her window at the setting sun, a familiar melancholy settling over him. No, it wasn't magic. He decided to give her a small piece of the truth. It's something from where I used to live. Lucy didn't press. She could see the sadness in his eyes, shadow of a world he couldn't return to. Instead, she changed the subject. That locket. Did you feel anything strange from it? Before he activated it, he looked at her, surprised by the question. You felt it too. She shook her head. No, not at all. But I saw your face when you first entered the room. You sensed it, didn't you? Long before he used it. He nodded slowly. Her perception was sharper than he gave her credit for. It confirmed his suspicion. He was the only one who could feel it. This threat was his, whether he wanted it to be or not. He looked at Lucy, at the fading sunlight catching in her blonde hair, at the genuine concern in her brown eyes, and a fierce, protective feeling swelled in his chest. He had come to this world with nothing, expecting nothing. But now, he had found people he cared about. He had found a home in their loud, chaotic guild. He had found a reason to fight again. It's nothing to worry about, he lied, forcing a reassuring smile. Just some bad energy. It's over now. But as he looked out at the darkening sky, he could feel it, the faint, omnipresent hum of the void, a silent promise of a storm to come. And he knew, with a grim certainty, that it was very far from over. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. The S-Class Trial in a Demon's Heart. The air in the fairy tale guild hall crackled with a unique, frantic energy that only surfaced once a year. It was a potent cocktail of hope, ambition, and barely contained anxiety. The announcement of the S-Class Mage promotion trial was imminent, and every eligible member was on edge, their usual brawling tempered by a nervous anticipation. Natsu was practically vibrating in his seat, Gray was, for once, fully clothed and brooding, and Kana was strategically nursing a single mug of beer, saving her full capacity for either celebration or commiseration. Naruto observed the spectacle from his corner, a bowl of Mirajane's ramen held in his left hand. He didn't fully grasp the weight of the event, but he understood the desire to be acknowledged, to have one's strength recognized. It was the dream that had fueled his entire childhood. Makarov appeared on the second-floor railing, his presence instantly commanding the attention of the entire guild. A hush fell. The time has come once again. The master's voice boomed, filled with a grandfatherly pride. To test your strength, your spirit, and your heart. To see who among you is ready to bear the title of S-Class Mage and carry the future of this guild on their shoulders. A roar of excitement went up. Makarov unfurled a scroll. This year's participants are Natsu Dragneel. Natsu leapt onto a table, breathing a plume of fire. Gray Fullbuster. Gray gave a curt, confident nod. Kana Alberona. She raised her mug in a silent toast. Levi Magarden. Elfman Strauss. And Fried Justine. Each name was met with cheers and shouts of encouragement. The list was what everyone expected. Then Makarov cleared his throat, a twinkle in his eye. This year, however, we have one final candidate. He is new to our guild, but in his short time here, he has displayed a power, a character, and a quiet resolve that cannot be ignored. Makarov's G.A.s swept across the room and landed directly on Naruto. The seventh participant is Naruto Uzumaki. A wave of stunned silence rolled through the hall, so absolute that the creak of the floorboards was audible. It was followed by a wave of confused murmurs. Natsu's jaw hung open, his celebratory fire extinguished. Erza, sitting at the bar with a slice of strawberry cake, paused with her fork halfway to her mouth. Her expression thoughtful. No one disputed Naruto's power. They had all seen the aftermath of his discussion with the Iron Hound Guild, but he was an outsider, a mystery. Naruto himself was the most surprised of all. He pointed at his own chest with a quizzical look. Me, what the hell, Gramps? Natsu finally yelled, though it was more out of shock than anger. He hasn't even been on a real mission with me yet. My decision is final, Makarov declared. Naruto's strength is undeniable, but strength alone does not make an S-class mage. This trial will test his heart and his ability to work as part of our family. That is all that matters. Lucy leaned over to Naruto, whispering frantically. Naruto, this is a huge deal. S-class mages get to take the most dangerous, highest-paying jobs. They're the pillars of the guild. He just nodded slowly, the implications beginning to sink in. This wasn't just a test. It was a statement. Makarov was officially declaring him a true member of Fairy Tail, worthy of its highest honor. A strange warmth spread through his chest. The trial will take place on our sacred ground, Tenro Island. Makarov continued. For the first stage, you will work with a partner. Your goal is to overcome the trials and reach the tomb of our first master, Mavis Vermilion. Now, for the pairings. The tension ratcheted up again. The choice of a par. Tennesseer could make or break a candidate's chances. Natsu, you will be with Happy. Gray, you will partner with Loke. Makarov rattled off the list. When he came to Naruto's name, he paused dramatically. And Naruto will be partnered with Mirajane. This second announcement sent another, softer ripple of surprise through the guild. Mirajane, who had opted out of participating herself this year, was nay of the guild's most powerful and beloved members. To pair her with the enigmatic newcomer was a significant gesture. Mirajane looked over at Naruto from behind the bar, her ever-present smile offered to him like a gift. There was no hesitation in her eyes, only a gentle, reassuring acceptance. It will be a pleasure to work with you, Naruto. He met her gaze, and in that moment, the noisy, chaotic guild hall seemed to fade away. Her calm was a stark contrast to the storm that so often raged inside him. He gave her a small, genuine smile in return. Likewise, Mirajane. The boat ride to Tenru Island was as boisterous as one would expect. Natsu, predictably, was a sickly green color, draped over the railing. Gray and Elfman were engaged in a loud argument about what it meant to be a real man, while Erza stood at the prow. A stoic and beautiful figurehead staring into the endless blue of the ocean. Naruto and Mirajane found a quiet spot near the stern. The sea air was clean and sharp, a welcome change from the stuffy confines of the guild. For a while, they simply watched the waves, content in a comfortable silence. It was Mirajane who broke it, her voice as soft as the sea breeze. You seem at peace here, she observed. Naruto glanced at her. She wasn't looking at him, but at the churning wake of the boat. Where I'm from, my homeland was known for its whirlpools. The admission was small, a single, carefully chosen stone from the mountain of his past, but it was more than he had shared with anyone else. That's why your name is Naruto, she said, not as a question, but as a statement of quiet understanding. The maelstrom. He was taken aback. You know what it means. She finally turned to him, a knowing light in her violet eyes. I asked Levi. I was curious. She hadn't pried into his past, but she had cared enough to understand his name. The simple act touched him more deeply than he would have admitted. You're very controlled, you know, he found himself saying, changing the subject. Everyone here, their power is loud. It's like a bonfire. Yours, he trailed off, trying to find the right words. Yours is like the ocean. Mostly calm on the surface, there's a strength in the depths that could swallow the world. Mirajane's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, a flicker of ancient sadness in her eyes before it was carefully replaced. I haven't always been this way. There was a time when my power was a storm I couldn't control. It hurt people. It frightened them. It frightened my own siblings. She looked down at her hands, which were resting in her lap. After my sister Lizanna, after we thought we lost her, I decided that power wasn't worth the pain it could cause. The world had enough monsters. It didn't need another one. So I locked that part of myself away. It was a confession, whispered into the vastness of the sea. A truth she rarely, if ever, spoke aloud. She was sharing the key to the deepest, most guarded part of her soul. Naruto listened, his gaze unwavering. He thought of the villagers of Konoha who had once looked at him with fear and hatred. He thought of the tailed beast sealed within him, a being of unimaginable power that he had been forced to tame, to understand, to befriend. He understood her burden completely. Power is just a tool, he said softly, his voice resonating with the conviction of hard-won experience. It's the hand that wields it that defines it as monstrous or not. He looked at her, his blue eyes clear and honest. I have never sensed anything but kindness in your hands, Mirajane. A single tear escaped her eye, tracing a glistening path down her cheek. She quickly wiped it away, but the smile that returned to her face was different. It was brighter, less guarded, as if his words had lifted a weight she hadn't realized she was still carrying. In that moment, on a boat in the middle of a boundless ocean, a profound and unspoken connection formed between the maelstrom and the sea. Tenro Island was a place of primal, ancient magic. Giant, gnarled trees formed a dense canopy, and the air hummed with a palpable energy. Makarov explained the first trial. 8 paths led from the beach. And only on 3 of those paths would they face a battle against one of the waiting S-class mages. The others were either empty or filled with other traps. The goal was to reach the tomb at the island's center. So, which path do we choose? Naruto asked as the candidates scattered. Mirajane surveyed the entrances, a thoughtful finger on her chin. Path E, she said decisively. Za usually chooses a battle-heavy path for her test. Gildarts isn't here, and Master Makarov wouldn't make me fight. It's our quietest and safest bet. They set off down Path E, a winding trail that led them deeper into the lush emerald forest. The air was peaceful, filled with the songs of strange birds. Their earlier conversation had left a comfortable intimacy between them, and they walked in easy companionship. The peace was shattered without warning. A massive explosion ripped through the forest to the south, sending a column of black smoke billowing into the sky. It wasn't the controlled burst of a trial battle. It was violent, chaotic, and filled with a malicious intent. Moments later, a single red flare shot up from the direction of the explosion, the emergency signal. The trial was under attack. What was that? Mirajane gasped, her serene demeanor vanishing, replaced by the sharp focus of an S-class mage. Before Naruto could answer, they were surrounded. Figures dropped from the trees. Their faces hidden by grotesque, grinning masks, their bodies adorned with the emblem of a slavering wolf's head. There were at least 20 of them. Well, the leader, a hulking man with a massive, 2-headed axe, chuckled. Looks like we found some of fairy tale's finest. The boss said to take you all down. The age of fairies is over. The era of the ravenous maw has begun. Yuto and Mirajane were instantly back to back, their brief moment of peace forgotten. I'll take the ones on the right, Naruto said, his voice flat and cold. Mirajane nodded, her hands already glowing with a soft purple light. Leave the leader to me. She transformed, but not into the demonic form she had spoken of. Her body was enveloped in a skin-tight, light-colored outfit, and small wings outed from her back, her Satan soul, Halphus. It was powerful, but Naruto could sense it was a fraction of her true strength. She was holding back. The battle began. Naruto was a phantom, a blur of motion. He didn't use clones or jutsu. It was pure, brutally efficient taijutsu. He flowed through the enemy ranks, disabling his opponents with precise strikes to their joints and pressure points. He was a whirlwind of controlled chaos, his single arm moving with the speed and force of 10. Mirajane was a match for the leader, her aerial attacks fast and powerful. But the man was strong, his axe cleaving through trees as he swung wildly. And more importantly, he was cruel. Is that all you've got, Mirajane Strauss? He taunted, blocking one of her energy blasts. The famous she-devil, I heard you went soft. Lost your nerve after your little sister kicked the bucket. The moment the words left his mouth, the temperature on the entire island seemed to drop. Mirajane froze in midair. Her face, which had been a mask of concentration, became utterly blank. The soft purple glow around her vanished, sucked into her body like a dying star. A new energy began to radiate from her, an aura so immense, so dark and oppressive, that the very air grew thick and heavy. The members of Ravenous Maw, who had been fighting Naruto, stopped dead in their tracks, paralyzed by a primal fear. Naruto, having just dispatched his last opponent, turned to see what was happening. He saw Mirajane floating in the air, her head bowed. The ground beneath her began to crack, and a column of pure, terrifying darkness erupted around her. You should not have said that, she whispered, her voice a low, guttural sound that was not her own. When she looked up, her violet eyes were gone, replaced by glowing, golden slits. Her white hair darkened to a stormy gray, swept back by the sheer force of her power. Her arms became scaled and clawed, massive demonic wings ripped from her back, and elegant, curved horns sprouted from her temples. Her body was clad in a dark, form-fitting armor that seemed to be forged from nightmare itself. This was Satan's soul, Citri. This was the she-devil, unleashed and unforgiving. The leader of Ravenous Maw took a step back, his bravado evaporating into raw terror. What in the hell are you? Mirajane didn't answer with words. She disappeared. One moment she was floating in the air. The next she was in front of him, her clawed hand gripping his face. She lifted the massive man off the ground with one arm, his struggles pathetic and useless. You speak of my sister, she hissed. Her voice a venomous whisper. Allow me to show you the hell reserved for those who mock the bonds of family. She casually tossed him into the air and gathered a sphere of demonic energy in her palm. A miniature black hole of destructive power. The remaining Ravenous Maw mages, snapping out of their fear-induced paralysis, fled into the forest, screaming in terror. The attack was about to be unleashed. An attack that would not just kill the man, but utterly annihilate him and a significant portion of the island. But before she could fire, a hand gently covered hers. It was Naruto. He had moved so quickly even she hadn't tracked it. He stood before her, his body positioned between her and her target, making no move to defend himself. He simply placed his hand over hers, his touch surprisingly warm against her cold, scaled skin. His other hand came to rest gently on her cheek. Mirajane, he said, his voice calm and steady amidst the storm of her power. He isn't worth it. Don't let him turn you into the monster he thinks you are. Her golden, slitted eyes stared into his endless blue ones. Rage warred with a deep, soul-crushing sorrow within her. She was a monster. This form proved it. She expected him to recoil, to look at her with the same fear and disgust everyone else did. But he didn't. He wasn't looking at the demon. He was looking at her. And in his eyes, there was no fear. There was no disgust. There was only a profound understanding, and something else, something that looked like awe. This power, he said softly, his thumb gently stroking her cheek. It's beautiful. It's the strength you use to protect your family. There is no darkness in that. His words, his touch, his complete and utter acceptance of this terrifying part of her, broke through the rage. The demonic energy receded. The golden slits of her eyes softened, and the familiar violet returned, now swimming with unshed tears. The horns and wings dissolved, the dark armor faded, and she was just Mirajane again. Collapsing into his arms, a ragged sob escaping her lips. He held her, his one arm a strong, steady anchor in her emotional tempest. He let her cry, her tears soaking the front of his tattered jacket. Until the shudders subsided. As he held her, his senses, no longer focused on the battle, picked up something he'd missed in the chaos. He looked over at the unconscious form of the Ravenous Maw leader. The man's own energy was crude and unremarkable, but clinging to him, like a faint, sickly perfume, was a trace of something else. It was the hum, the alien, void-like signature of the Nocturne Locket. Naruto's expression hardened. This attack wasn't random. The rival guild wasn't acting on its own. They were pawns, puppets being manipulated by the same shadowy entity he had been sensing since his arrival. The enemy was no longer just watching. It was making its move. The trial was forgotten, the victory meaningless. He held Mirajane closer, a fierce, protective resolve hardening in his heart. The S-class exam had been a test of strength. But the real trial, he now understood, had only just begun. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. Whispers of the Void. In the aftermath of the Tenro Island incident, a fragile peace settled over Fairy Tail. The S-class trial had been officially suspended, the master citing the unexpected intervention of a dark guild as the primary reason. The truth, however, known only to a select few, was that the master recognized a far greater threat lurking in the shadows, and he needed his guild united, not competing. Mirajane had withdrawn for a few days, grappling with the raw power she had unleashed. Naruto sought her out in the guild's quiet library, finding her hunched over a tome, her face pale. He didn't say much, simply sat across from her. He placed a cup of her favorite tea, brewed by himself, on the table. He just sat, a silent, unwavering presence. His unwavering acceptance, shown in the forest, had been a balm to her soul. She eventually looked up, a soft, grateful smile gracing her lips. Their bond, forged in the crucible of her past and his understanding, deepened in those quiet moments, blossoming into something fragile and precious. The other guild members were still abuzz with the stories from Tenro. Natsu, despite his disappointment at the trial's suspension, was fired up by the idea of a new, shadowy enemy. Gray was as stoic as ever, but a new focus shone in his eyes. And Erza's gaze lingered on Naruto often, a silent question in her eyes. One evening, after most of the guild had dispersed, leaving only the soft clatter of Mirajane cleaning the bar, Erza found Naruto sitting alone by the darkened window, staring out at the magnolia night sky. The city lights twinkled like scattered jewels, a stark contrast to the vast, empty canvas above. She approached him slowly, her armor glinting softly in the dim light. She sat in the chair opposite him, a rare moment of stillness from the usually bustling warrior. Naruto, she began, her voice softer than usual. I have never seen power like yours. On Tenro Island, when you faced that dark guild, and then, with Mirajane. He turned his head to look at her, his blue eyes reflective. What about it, Erza? She hesitated, her usual certainty wavering. It is immense. And yet, you wield it with such control, such restraint. It is not the power of a mage. Not truly. What is it? He looked back out at the sky. He had evaded this question countless times. But with Erza, it felt different. She wasn't asking out of mere curiosity, but out of a deep, earnest attempt to understand him, to bridge the gap between their worlds. He could see the echoes of his own past in her, the rigid self-control, the fierce protection of her comrades, the quiet scars of a lonely childhood. It's not magic, he finally admitted, his voice a low murmur. Where I came from, we called it chakra. It's the life energy of a world, of a person, woven with physical and spiritual energy. We mold it, shape it into jutsus. Fire, water, earth, illusions, healing. I was born with a lot of it. He paused, picking his words carefully. And I had a burden. A great one. A monster, sealed inside me from birth. It made me feared, alone. Erza listened, her expression unreadable. She recognized the pain in his voice. She understood the weight of being feared for something you couldn't control. She thought of her own past, of the Tower of Heaven, of the fear she had inspired and carried. My power. It was like an ocean I drowned in sometimes, he continued, his gaze distant. I had to learn to swim. To control it, or it would control me. It took years. Years of fighting, of losing people, of learning that true strength isn't just about raw power. It's about who you're fighting for. He finally turned back to her, and his eyes met hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. You have that too, don't you? That burden, that monster inside you, the one you keep locked away. But you use your power to protect. To be a shield. That's why you're so strong, Erza. Her jaw tightened. He saw through her, with an unnerving clarity. He didn't fear the parts of her she guarded so fiercely, he understood them. He understood the constant battle within her to maintain control, to not let the darker aspects of her past consume her. In that shared understanding, a new bridge was built between them, not of steel, but of a quiet, profound empathy. A deep, silent respect. You're right, she whispered, her voice barely audible. It was a confession she rarely made. Thank you, Naruto. Quote. He just nodded. The moment stretched, filled with unspoken truths, before Erza finally rose. She gave him a small, almost imperceptible smile, a rare softening of her stern features. We should get some rest. There is always trouble waiting for us tomorrow. She left him to his thoughts, but the quiet understanding between them lingered like a warmth in the cool night air. Days later, a different kind of respite unfolded at Lucis' apartment. It wasn't a dramatic confession or a shared moment of vulnerability, but something far simpler, far more grounding. Naruto had offered to help her with her groceries, an unusual but not unwelcome offer. They walked through the bustling market, his quiet presence a steady counterpoint to her cheerful chatter as she haggled for fresh vegetables and complained about the rising price of bread. Back in her small, cozy apartment, He helped her put away the groceries, his single hand surprisingly adept at organizing her pantry. He observed the stacks of books, the astronomical charts pinned to her wall, the framed photographs of her celestial spirits and her friends. It was a space that radiated warmth, personality, and the vibrant life of its occupant. It was a stark contrast to the sparse, solitary apartments he'd known for most of his life. "You have a nice place, Lucy," he commented, a rare compliment from him. "Thanks," she beamed, delighted. "It's small, but it's mine. And it's filled with memories. This picture, that's of me in Aquarius, after a really tough fight. She's a grump, but she really cares." She pointed to a framed drawing of the water bearer. He smiled, a genuine, easy curve of his lips. He understood the value of memories, of keeping close the people and moments that shaped you. His own mental library was filled with them, a precious hoard he clung to. They sat at her small table, sipping tea. Lucy was scribbling in her notebook, detailing a new summoning sequence she was developing. Naruto just watched her, the quiet domesticity of the moment settling over him like a warm blanket. He realized, with a quiet jolt, how long it had been since he had experienced something so utterly normal. So utterly devoid of conflict or urgency. This was what peace felt like. Not the absence of war, but the presence of small, everyday joys. "You know," Lucy said, breaking the comfortable silence, "it's weird. But you're really calming to be around. Even when Natsu and Gray are going crazy, you just absorb it all." She looked at him, her brown eyes soft. "It's like you're a quiet storm. You've seen so much, haven't you?" He looked at her, and for a moment, he considered telling her more, letting her see the depths of the storms he had weathered. But the tranquility of the moment was too precious to shatter. He simply nodded. "Yeah, a lot." She reached across the table, placing her hand gently over his. Her touch was light, comforting, a simple gesture of empathy. "Well, I'm glad you're here now. And I'm glad you're with us." His gaze met hers, and in her innocent kindness, her unwavering belief in him, he felt a warmth spread through him that had nothing to do with chakra or magic. It was the warmth of being truly seen, truly valued. He squeezed her hand gently in return, a silent promise. This fragile, precious normalcy, these moments of simple connection, he would protect them with everything he had. The quiet moments, however, were destined to be fleeting. The world, or perhaps the universe, had a way of reminding him that his past was not entirely behind him. And his future was far from settled. He was back at the guild, watching a particularly intense arm wrestling match between Elfman and a surprisingly strong Evergreen, when the guild doors swung open, not with a bang, but with a sharp, professional precision. A group of figures in crisp, pristine white uniforms entered, their movements synchronized and formal. They wore the distinctive crest of the Magic Council, and their leader, a stern-faced woman with tightly pulled back silver hair, walked with an air of absolute authority. Behind her marched a squad of elite rune knights, their hands resting on the hilts of their runic weapons. The usual cacophony of the guild hall died down instantly. The silence that fell was heavy, thick with apprehension. Master Makarov, the woman's voice was cold, formal, and carried an undercurrent of barely suppressed disapproval. "I am Councilwoman Ilva. We are here on official council business. We have received disturbing reports concerning a new member of your guild." Makarov, who had been sitting at the bar, observing the arm wrestling, slowly turned, his usual cheerful demeanor replaced by a steely-eyed gaze. "Councilwoman, to what do we owe this unexpected visit?" Ilva's eyes, cold and assessing, swept across the guild, lingering for a moment on Erza, then on Mirajane, before finally fixing on Naruto. He was still in his corner, his expression unreadable, but a faint, almost imperceptible hum had started to vibrate in his chest. It was the hum of the void, subtly growing stronger, responding to this new development. Our intelligence network has been monitoring unusual energy signatures in the Fury region, Ilva stated, her voice devoid of emotion. Signatures unlike any magic known to Earth-land. These anomalies began approximately 1 month ago, coinciding with the sudden appearance of a certain individual in Magnolia. She paused, her gaze drilling into Naruto. Naruto Uzumaki, a man of immense, unregulated power. A power that, by all accounts, appears to be of extra-dimensional origin. A gasp went through the guild. The Magic Council knew. The Council has determined that your presence, Uzumaki, poses a significant and an unpredictable threat to the stability of Fury, and potentially, to the entire magical world, Ilva continued, her voice rising slightly in volume. Your actions on Tenro Island, while seemingly in defense of the guild, displayed an uncontrolled destructive potential that cannot be ignored. And the incident with the Dark Guild, Iron Hound, such a complete annihilation of a rival guild's fighting force, executed with such casual ease, is alarming. Naruto finally looked up, meeting her gaze evenly. I disabled them. I didn't kill anyone. Disabling them with such force is still a breach of standard magical combat protocols. Ilva snapped, her patience clearly wearing thin. We have received reports from a reliable, highly placed source, an advisor to the council, who has provided irrefutable evidence that your very existence here is a danger. That your power draws unwanted attention to our world. Naruto felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. An advisor. A highly placed source. It wasn't a coincidence. It was the puppet master, finally revealing its hand. The hum in his chest pulsed with a low, malevolent energy, confirming his suspicions. The overarching antagonist wasn't just observing. It was actively manipulating the political powers of Earthland against him, turning his new home into a hostile environment. Therefore, Ilva concluded, her voice ringing with authority. By decree of the Magic Council, Naruto Uzumaki, you are to be taken into custody for immediate assessment and, if necessary, containment. Resist, and you will face the full force of the Rune Knights and the Magic Council. The Rune Knights behind her raised their runic weapons, their magical energy flaring ominously. The atmosphere in the guild hall became charged, thick with tension. Every fairy tale mage was on their feet. Their eyes narrowed, their fists clenched. They were a family, and their newest member, their quiet storm, was being threatened. Makarov stepped forward, placid. G himself squarely between Naruto and the councilwoman. His eyes, usually kind, were now burning with an fierce, protective fire. Councilwoman Ilva, he said, his voice surprisingly calm, though it vibrated with a dangerous undertone. Naruto Uzumaki is a member of Fairy Tail. He is family, and we do not abandon our family. Not to dark guilds, and certainly not to the fear-mongering of a short-sighted, prejudiced council. Ilva stared at him, her expression hardening. Master Makarov, are you defying the Magic Council? I am protecting my children, Makarov replied, his voice unwavering. He glanced back at Naruto. A silent promise in his gaze. He has brought no harm to this guild, nor to this city. He has done nothing but defend the innocent and offer quiet strength to those who needed it. He is no threat. He is a protector. Quote, Erza stepped forward, her armored form radiating defiance. Mirajane floated down from behind the bar, her gentle smile replaced by a fierce, determined gaze. Lucy, her keys clutched in her hand, stood shoulder to shoulder with Natsu and Gray, her eyes burning with loyalty. The entire guild, a unified, formidable wall, stood behind Naruto. Naruto looked at them, at the sea of determined faces, at the unconditional loyalty in their eyes. He had known loneliness, he had known fear, but he had also known the fierce, unwavering love of a true family. And in this moment, looking at these people, his new family, he knew he was not alone. The hum of the void, though still present, felt less threatening, overshadowed by the roaring, vibrant life of Fairy Tail. The standoff was set, the storm was coming, and he was ready. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. A declaration of war. The silence in the guild hall was a drawn breath, a moment of crystalline tension before the inevitable shatter. Councilwoman Ilva's ultimatum hung in the air, cold and absolute. Makarov's defiance was a lit match held to a fuse. So be it, Ilva said, her voice dropping to a glacial cal. That was more terrifying than any shout. Her gaze was fixed on Makarov, but her command was for her knights. Subdue them. Prioritize the target. Use of restraining runes is authorized. The Rune Knights moved as one. A disciplined wave of white and steel. The air crackled as they activated their primary weapons, long, metallic staves that hummed with magical energy. Runic circles glowed on the floor around them as they prepared their capture magic. Fairy Tail did not wait. Fire dragons roar, ice make. Lance, Natsu and Gray, their rivalry forgotten in the face of a common enemy, unleashed a torrent of fire and ice. The twin elemental streams tore through the hall, not aimed to kill, but to disrupt, to create a wall of chaos between their family and the intruders. The initial wave of knights was forced to scatter, raising magical shields that sizzled and cracked under the onslaught. It was the opening salvo in a war that had just been declared. The guild hall erupted into a maelstrom of motion and magic. Levy Magarden, her face a mask of fierce concentration, scribbled in the air with her fingers. Solid script. Iron. A massive wall of metal erupted from the floorboards. Block. King a flanking maneuver from another squad of knights. Elfman, roaring that it was a man's duty to protect his home, charged forward, his arm transformed into a monstrous, scaled appendage, scattering knights like bowling pins. Naruto stood in the eye of the storm, a tempest of emotions warring within him. Guilt, sharp and bitter, twisted in his gut. These people, his new friends, were putting their lives and their guild on the line for him. For him, a stranger who had brought nothing but trouble to their doorstep. But beneath the guilt, a colder, harder emotion was taking root, a fury so profound it felt like ice in his veins. These outsiders had threatened his home. They had threatened his family. And that was a line he would never allow anyone to cross again. He saw a rune knight break through the front line, his staff aimed at a distracted Lucy. Naruto moved. He vanished from his spot, reappearing in a flicker of orange so fast he was barely a blur. He didn't strike the knight. He simply placed his left palm on the man's extended staff. A precise, controlled pulse of his own energy, not even chakra, just pure life force, traveled up the weapon. The intricate runes that powered it sputtered and died. The magical energy within it instantly neutralized. The knight stared at his now useless weapon in stunned disbelief before Naruto hooked a leg behind his and sent him tumbling harmlessly into a pile of broken tables. He wouldn't be the cause of their pain. He would be their shield. Then came the true declarations, the ones that were not shouted, but demonstrated with absolute, unwavering resolve. Erza stepped forward, planting herself directly in front of Naruto, her back to him, facing the onslaught. She was a living fortress, a bulwark of crimson hair and unyielding steel. Requip. A brilliant flash of golden light enveloped her. When it faded, she was clad in her adamantine armor, a massive, near-indestructible suit with two colossal shields. She slammed the bases of the shields into the floor, the impact shaking the entire building. She did not shout. She did not charge. She simply stood, an immovable object, a declaration of intent more powerful than any words. Her message was clear. To get to him, you would have to go through her. And no one went through the adamantine armor. To her right, a wave of palpable, oppressive darkness rolled out. Mirajane floated a few inches off the ground. Her gentle smile gone, replaced by a chillingly serene expression. Her Satan soul was active, but it was a controlled transformation. Only her hands had shifted into wicked, black claws. And a pair of small, bat-like wings had sprouted from her back. It was a fraction of her power, a mere hint of the she-devil, but the raw magical pressure she was emitting was not to make the rune knights in front of her visibly falter. "Oh dear," she said, her voice a silken purr that dripped with menace. "It seems you're scuffing up the floors. I'd hate to have to redecorate." Her threat was not of a simple fight, but of utter, demonic annihilation, a promise held in check only by her own formidable will. And to his left, Lucy, who had been momentarily frozen in fear, found her resolve. Her face hardened, her brown eyes blazing with a fierce loyalty that chased away all doubt. She raised a golden key. "I don't care about the council or your orders," she shouted, her voice ringing with conviction. "Naruto is our friend. He is one of us. Open, Gate of the Lion." Leo. In a flash of celestial light, Loke appeared, clad in his tailored suit, his fists already crackling with the golden light of Regulus. He pushed his glasses up his nose, his usual suave demeanor replaced by a grim seriousness. He stood protectively in front of Lucy, his gaze locked on the rune knights. His very presence was a defiance of the rules, a spirit who had once been exiled for defending a friend, now summoned to do so again. It was Lucy's ultimate statement. Her bonds, her family, were a law unto themselves. More powerful than any decree from the council. Councilwoman Ilda's face was a mask of cold fury. Her authority was being challenged, her elite forces being held at bay by what she saw as a chaotic rabble. Enough, she roared. Formation Gamma, enact the Grand Seal of Solomon. The Rune Knights disengaged from individual combat and fell back, forming a complex, circular AR pattern around the center of the guild hall. They slammed their staves into the floor in unison. The runic circles that had been glowing on the floor now blazed to life, connecting to form a massive, intricate magic circle that encompassed nearly the entire room. Chains of pure magical energy erupted from the lines, shooting towards every fairy tale member, aiming to bind them all in an inescapable net of law magic. Erza's shields blocked a dozen chains, but more simply wrapped around them. Mirajane's demonic energy dissolved the chains that touched her, but she was being overwhelmed by sheer numbers. Loke blasted several apart with his Regulus punches, but for every one he destroyed, 3 more took its place. The guild was being systematically restrained. The primary target of the seal, however, was Naruto. 100 chains, thicker and brighter than the others, shot towards him from all directions. He met them head-on. As the chains converged, he didn't try to dodge or block. He took a deep breath, drew on the natural energy of the world around him, and let his own 6-path Sage Mode energy flare to life, not in a grand display, but as an invisible, potent aura. The moment he Council's magic chains entered his personal space, they didn't shatter, they unraveled. The complex magical formulas that composed them, the very laws of magic they were built upon, were simply undone. His energy was so fundamentally different, so alien to the Ethernano-based system of this world, that it acted as a universal solvent, deconstructing their magic at a conceptual level. Ylva stared, her mouth agape in disbelief. The Grand Seal of Solomon, one of the Council's most powerful binding spells, a magic that could restrain a dragon, was dissolving around this man-like mist in the sun. As the energies of the battle reached their crescendo, Naruto's senses, heightened to a razor's edge, caught something. A flicker. High above the chaos, outside the guild hall, perched on the rooftop of the building across the street. A figure stood cloaked in shadow. Naruto couldn't see a face, but he could feel the presence. It was the source of the hum. The advisor. The malevolent consciousness he had felt in the sky. In the locket, on Tenro Island. Now, for the first time, he had a direction, a source. The being's concentration must have slipped in its observation of the battle, allowing its true nature to bleed through. Naruto's head snapped up, his gaze piercing through the guild hall wall, across the street, and locking directly onto the shadowed figure. He saw no details, only an outline against the setting sun. But he felt the cold, ancient hunger of the entity like a physical blow. It was an intelligence vast, cosmic, and utterly devoid of empathy. It looked upon them not as people, but as insects in a jar. The shadowed figure seemed to stiffen, surprised at being so directly perceived. For a heartbeat, their wills clashed across the distance, the warm, fierce determination of a shinobi who fought for his bonds, and the cold, calculating observation of a being from the void. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, the presence vanished. The figure was gone. The hum receded, leaving behind only the lingering chill of its attention. The stalemate was clear. The Council's best containment spell had failed. Fairy Tail, while unable to drive the knights out, was too powerful and too determined to be subdued without a battle that would level half of Magnolia and result in countless deaths, a political and humanitarian disaster Ylva could not afford. Her face was pale, her composure finally cracking. She had underestimated their resolve. She had underestimated him. Fall back, she commanded, her voice tight with barely controlled rage. The Rune Knights disengaged, their pristine uniforms now scuffed and torn, their confidence shattered. They retreated from the guild hall in a disciplined but hasty withdrawal. Ylva stood at the doorway, her final glare directed at Makarov. But her words were for Naruto. "This is not over, Master Makarov. You have made an enemy of the Magic Council today. And you," she said, her eyes narrowing at Naruto, "whatever you are, we will uncover your secrets. The world will not tolerate an anomaly like you forever." She turned and was gone, leaving a wake of destruction and a heavy, foreboding silence. The tension in the hall broke. Natsu let out a whoop of victory. But it was half-hearted. Everyone was breathing heavily, the adrenaline of the fight giving way to the grim reality of what had just transpired. They had won the battle, but in doing so, They had declared themselves enemies of the very institution that governed their world. Erza dispelled her armor, her face grim. Mirajane landed softly, her demonic features receding. Her expression clouded with worry. Lucy rushed to Naruto's side, her face pale. "Are you okay?" Naruto looked around the trashed guild hall, at the bruised and exhausted faces of his friends. He saw the unwavering loyalty in their eyes, the unconditional support they had offered without a moment's hesitation. He was overwhelmed by a wave of gratitude so powerful it almost brought him to his knees. But as he looked out the shattered doorway, towards the spot where the shadowy figure had stood, a cold certainty settled over him. The council wasn't his real enemy. They were just the first line of attack, unwitting pawns in a much larger, more terrifying game. The true war had been declared not by Ylva's words, but in that silent, chilling clash of wills with the being from the void. And he was standing at the heart of the coming storm. Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. The Weight of a Choice. The aftermath of the battle was not one of celebration. A somber mood, thick and heavy as funeral smoke, settled over the ruined guild hall. The shattered tables and cracked floorboards were a testament to their defiance, but also a stark reminder of the lines they had crossed. They had stood together, a united front against the world. Now, they had to face the consequences of that unity. Makarov stood on the second-floor balcony, his small frame silhouetted against the gaping hole in the wall. His gaze was distant, looking out over the city of Magnolia, a city he had sworn to protect. He had just made a decision that put every soul in it, every member of his guild, in jeopardy. He finally turned, his expression grim. "Erza, Mirajane, Lucy, Naruto," he called out, his voice a low rumble that cut through the quiet murmurings of the other guild members. "My office." Now, the four of them shared a look. This was it, the debriefing, the planning, the reckoning. They followed the master up the stairs, the creak of the steps echoing the heavy weight in their hearts. Makarov's office was a small, cluttered room, filled with books and artifacts from a lifetime of adventure. It was a place of wisdom and history, but tonight, it felt like a war room. He sat behind his large oak desk, his hands steepled in front of him. His usually twinkling eyes shadowed with a deep, profound weariness. The four of them stood before him, a strange and potent assembly, the unwavering knight, the compassionate demon, the loyal celestial mage, and the quiet storm from another world. "The council will not let this rest," Makarov began, his voice grave. "They will declare us a dark guild. They will freeze our assets, put a bounty on our heads. Every legal guild in Fury will be obligated to hunt us down. We have become outlaws." The words landed with a thud in the silent room. It was a future they had all foreseen in the heat of the moment, but hearing it laid out so starkly was a sobering blow. "Let them try," Erza said immediately, her voice hard as the steel of her armor. "We did what was right. We protected our own. That is the first law of fairy tale. It supersedes any law made by the council." "I agree," Mirajane added, her gentle demeanor now underpinned by a core of unyielding resolve. "Our family is what matters. We will face whatever comes, together." Lucy nodded, her fists clenched at her sides. "Naruto is one of us. There was no other choice to make." Makarov looked at the three women, a flicker of pride in his weary eyes. Then his gaze shifted to Naruto, who had remained silent, his expression a turmoil of conflicting emotions. "And you, my boy?" the master asked softly. "You carry the heaviest burden of all. This is a war that has followed you here. Tell us what we are truly up against." Naruto met Makarov's gaze. He looked at Erza, at Mirajane, at Lucy. He saw their unwavering trust, their unquestioning support. They had fought for him without knowing the full story. He owed them the truth. All of it. He took a deep breath. "Where I come from," he began, his voice low and steady. "We fought a war against a being who wanted to trap the entire world in an endless dream, to steal their energy, their very existence. We won. But in the final battle, the power we unleashed, it tore a hole in reality. I was thrown through it." He recounted the story, not in detail, but in broad, stark strokes. He spoke of chakra, of shinobi, of tailed beasts. He spoke of a world of constant conflict, a world he had fought his entire life to protect, only to be ripped away from it at the moment of his victory. "Since I arrived here," he continued, his voice dropping even lower, I've felt something. A presence. A wrongness in the fabric of this world. I felt it on my first day. I felt it in the nocturne locket Lucy and I retrieved. I felt it on Tenro Island. Clinging to that dark guild like a disease. And today, I saw it. He described the shadowy figure on the rooftop, the overwhelming sense of a vast, cold, and hungry consciousness. Quote, the Magic Council's advisor, that's him. I don't know what it is, but it's not from this world. It's like me, an anomaly. But it's not lost. It's here for a reason. It's manipulating things, turning you against me. Because it sees me as a threat. Because our energies, they're from a similar place, a place outside your reality. The room was silent, the weight of his words pressing down on them. A war between gods, an extra-dimensional being, a cosmic threat. It was a scale of conflict that dwarfed even the darkest chapters of Earthland's history. So the Council is just a puppet, Erza surmised. Her strategic mind piecing it together. This entity is using them to isolate you, to weaken you, before it makes its real move. And it will not stop with Naruto, Mirajane whispered, AHOR. Refined understanding dawning on her face. A being that can manipulate the Council, that can orchestrate attacks from the shadows, it won't be satisfied with just one target. It will consume everything. Naruto nodded grimly. It's a parasite on a cosmic scale. And my presence here, it's like ringing a dinner bell. A wave of profound guilt washed over him. He looked at the floor, unable to meet their eyes. This is my fault. All of it. If I hadn't come here, none of this would be happening. Maybe the best thing for Fairy Tail is for me to leave. Draw it away from you. Fight it on my own. The words hung in the air. A desperate, self-sacrificing offer. A lonely solution from a boy who had spent a lifetime shouldering burdens alone. Don't be an idiot. The voice was Lucis, sharp and uncharacteristically angry. He looked up, startled. Her eyes were blazing, filled with a fiery indignation that mirrored Natsu's. Leave. You think we did all of this, that we fought the Council, that we became outlaws? Just for you to run away? She demanded, stepping closer to him. We didn't fight for the anomaly. We didn't fight for the powerhouse. We fought for Naruto, our friend, our family. Did you not hear a word we said? Quote, she's right, Erza said, her voice resonating with an unshakable conviction. She took a step forward, placing a hand on his shoulder. Her touch was firm, grounding. You are not a burden, Naruto. You are a member of this guild. Your battle is our battle. We have faced dark wizards, demons from the books of Zirf, and even dragons. We will face this new THR. Eat as we have faced all the others, together. Mirajane came to his other side, her expression one of fierce, unwavering tenderness. She didn't touch him, but her presence was a warmth that enveloped him. You told me that there is no darkness in using power to protect family, she said softly, her violet eyes locking with his. You are our family now, Naruto. Let us protect you. He looked between the three of them. Erza, his pillar of strength and shared understanding. Mirajane, his anchor of empathy and acceptance. Lucy, his beacon of unwavering friendship and light. In their faces, he saw not just loyalty, but something deeper. Something more profound. The unspoken emotions that had been simmering beneath the surface, the respect forged in battle with Erza, the deep emotional bond with Mirajane. The blossoming affection with Lucy, all came rushing to the forefront in this crucible of a moment. The air in the small office grew thick, charged with more than just the tension of the coming war. It was Lucy who took the final, terrifying step. Her anger faded, replaced by a raw, vulnerable honesty. It's more than that, she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. For me, it's more. I care about you, Naruto. More than just a friend. The confession, so simple and so brave, shattered the last of his defenses. Erza's gaze, which had been so fierce, softened. She looked at Naruto, a silent admission in her eyes. Her respect had grown into something more, a deep-seated admiration and a connection she hadn't felt for anyone since Jelal. She gave a small, almost imperceptible nod, confirming Lucy's sentiment as her own. Mirajane's gentle smile returned, but it was tinged with a profound, heartfelt emotion. Her gaze was an open book, revealing the depths of the affectio. And that had grown from their shared understanding of pain and power. He had accepted her demon, and in doing so, had captured her heart. Naruto was stunned into silence. He, who had spent his childhood starved for any kind of affection, was now standing in the center of an outpouring of love so genuine, so powerful, it left him breathless. He looked from Lucis' earnest, hopeful face, to Erza's strong, steady gaze, to Mirajane's gentle, all-encompassing warmth. He had never known this kind of love. He had loved Sakura, but it had been the one-sided, idealized love of a boy. He had loved his village, his friends, his masters. But this was different. It wasn't a choice between them. He saw now that their feelings, and his own burgeoning feelings for them, were not competing forces. They were three different notes in a single, beautiful, and incredibly complex chord. He felt a warmth spread through him, a light that chased away the last shadows of his loneliness, of his guilt. It was the light of a new family, a new home, a new future. He slowly raised his left hand, and Lucy took it. He looked at Erza, and she placed her gauntleted hand over his. He looked at Mirajane, and she completed the circle, her hand resting atop theirs. In the center of the room, under the weary but watchful eye of their master, they were no longer just four individuals. They were a unit, a promise, a vow. "I'm not going anywhere," Naruto said, his voice thick with an emotion he couldn't name. It was gratitude, it was love, it was a fierce, burning resolve. "I'm staying. With all of you. We'll face this thing together." Makarov watched the scene unfold, a slow, proud smile spreading across his face. He had seen many things in his long life, but he had never seen a bond quite like this. It was a power that no enemy, not even one from the stars, could hope to comprehend. The choice had been made. The lines were drawn. They were outlaws, hunted and besieged. They were facing a cosmic horror with the fate of their world on the line. But in that small, quiet office, surrounded by the warmth of a love he was only just beginning to understand, Naruto Uzumaki felt stronger than he ever had in his life. The weight of his past was still there, but he was no longer carrying it alone. Chapter 7 End. Chapter 8. The God from the Rift. The days following their declaration of war against the Magic Council were a tense, coiled spring. Fairy Tail was no longer a rambunctious guild hall. It was a fortress, a bastion of defiance in a world that had suddenly turned hostile. News traveled fast. They were officially branded a dark guild. Warrants were issued. Bounties were posted. Yet, the expected wave of attacks from legal guilds never came. There was a quiet, grudging respect for Fairy Tail across Fury. And few were willing to be the council's dogs of war against legends like Makarov and Erza Scarlet. It was a cold war, a standoff of reputation and will. Inside the guild, the dynamic had shifted. The usual chaos was replaced by a focused energy. Levi was at the center of a massive intelligence-gathering operation, her solid script magic creating intricate maps and cross-referencing Su. NCIL reports intercepted by Freed's enchantments. Natsu and Gray, for once, trained together, pushing each other to new heights, their usual bickering replaced by a grim determination. The heart of His new focus was the small group that now moved as one. Naruto, Erza, Mirajane, and Lucy were rarely apart. They strategized with Levi, trained in the forests outside of town, and in the quiet moments, simply existed in each other's presence. A silent language had developed between them. A shared look, a light touch on the arm, a small smile, each was a reaffirmation of the choice they had made in Makarov's office. The unspoken love that had been confessed now colored their every interaction, a quiet strength that was a more formidable defense than any magic. Naruto, guided by his unique sensory abilities, tried to find a trace of the shadowy advisor. He would sit for hours in a state of deep meditation, spreading his senses like a net across the continent. But the entity was a ghost, its presence scrubbed clean from the world, leaving behind only the cold, ambient hum of the void, a background radiation that was a constant, chilling reminder of the threat that watched them from beyond the veil. The attack, when it came, did not target Magnolia. It did not target Fairy Tail. It targeted the innocent. It started as a frantic report on a magical communication lacrima, a desperate, garbled plea from the port city of Harjan. The signal was weak, filled with static and screams. Monster. Things appearing from nowhere. The sky is, it's breaking. They're not attacking. They're erasing things. God. The buildings are just gone. The council isn't responding. Please, is anyone out there? Anyone? The signal cut out, replaced by a horrifying, high-pitched shriek that was not of this world. Makarov, who had been listening with a face like thunder, slammed his fist on the bar. Harjan. The first place Lucy met Natsu, Erza said, her voice tight, her hands already clenched into fists. It's a message, Naruto said. His eyes closed, his face pale. He was reaching out with his senses, and what he felt made his blood run cold. He felt hundreds of frantic, terrified life signatures. And he felt holes. Pockets of absolute nothingness opening up within the city, where life and energy had simply ceased to be. It's not an attack, it's an extermination. There was no debate, there was no hesitation. Natsu, Gray, Gajil, Wendy, Makarov roared, his voice filled with the fury of a protective father. Everyone who can fight, prepare for battle. We move out in 5 minutes. Erza, Naruto, you lead the charge. The guild exploded into a flurry of organized motion. This was not a job. This was a rescue. They were outlaws, but they were still fairy tale. And fairy tale protected people. That was a law that no council could ever erase. They arrived in Harjan to a scene from a waking nightmare. The sky above the port city was torn open, a shimmering, weeping wound in the fabric of reality. It was a violent shade of violet black, and from it, things were falling. They weren't creatures of flesh and bone. They were vaguely humanoid constructs of pure, chaotic energy, there. Forms constantly shifting and distorting like television static. Where they walked, the world unraveled. Cobblestones, buildings, carts, people, anything the rift fiends, as Natsu immediately dubbed them, touched would flicker. Lose its color, and then silently disintegrate into a fine gray dust that was then sucked back into the rift. There was no fire, no explosion, just a quiet, terrifying erasure. This is insane, Gray breathed. His usual bravado gone, replaced by a horrified awe. There are still people trapped in the eastern district. Erza commanded, her voice cutting through the shock. Lucy, Wendy, Levi, coordinate the evacuation. Get the civilians to the ships in the harbor. Natsu, Gray, Gajil, you're on crowd control. Draw the fiends. Attention. Create a perimeter. Mirajane, Naruto, with me. We're punching a hole through to the center of this mess. Her orders were precise, immediate, and without question. The guild scattered, each member a cog in a desperate, life-saving machine. Naruto created 1,000 shadow clones in a single, explosive burst. Go, he commanded them. Find every man, woman, and child. Get them to safety. The army of orange-clad figures fanned out. A wave of disciplined efficiency that stunned even the other fairy tale members. The clones were a perfect rescue force, able to be in 100 places at once, carrying the injured, guiding the lost, and forming human, or rather, clone walls to shield people from the encroaching fiends. The real Naruto moved with Erza and Mirajane towards the epicenter of the invasion, the area directly beneath the massive rift. Here, the fiends were larger, more aggressive. Erza was a blur of silver and steel. Requip. Heaven's wheel armor. She became a whirlwind of flying swords, a beautiful and deadly storm that carved through the energy constructs, forcing them to dissipate before they could reform. She was a one-woman army, her focus absolute as she protected her comrades' flanks. Mirajane unleashed her Satan soul, Halphus, a form built for speed and overwhelming power. She shot through the air like a comet, her energy blasts incinerating the fiends before they could even get close. She was the embodiment of righteous fury. Her gentle nature burned away to reveal the raw, protective power of the she-devil. Naruto was their spearhead. He didn't use his grander techniques. He didn't need to. He moved with a speed that made him seem to teleport, his fist and feet sheathed in a thin, potent layer of chakra. Each strike landed with the force of a cannonball, shattering the fiends' unstable forms. He created Rasengans in his palm, grinding the larger constructs into nothingness. Together, the three of them were an unstoppable force, a trinity of power and purpose, their movements perfectly synchronized, their trust absolute. They fought as if they had been doing so for a lifetime. But for every fiend they destroyed, 2 more seemed to fall from the rift. They were saving lives, they were winning the ground battle. But they were fighting the tide. It was a battle of attrition they could not win. And then, the pressure changed. The low, ambient hum of the void that had become AC. Constant in Naruto's senses suddenly amplified 1,000-fold. The air grew thick, heavy, vibrating with an immense, alien power. The Rift Fiends stopped their attack, turning in unison to look up at the tear in the sky. An army of puppets awaiting their master. The rift widened, the violet-black light within it intensifying until it was brighter than the sun. Then, from the light, a figure descended. It was not a monster. It was a being of sublime, terrifying perfection. It was humanoid in shape, but its body was forged from a material that was neither light nor shadow, but both at once. Its form was geometric, elegant. Its movements unnervingly smooth. It had no face, only a smooth, polished surface that reflected a distorted, star-filled void. When it spoke, the voice was not sound. It was a wave of pure thought, impressed directly into the minds of every living thing for miles. Less than enough. Greater than. The single word was a command of such absolute authority that the very air obeyed. The chaos of the battle ceased. Every member of Fairy Tail, every screaming civilian, every rift fiend, was frozen in place. Less than The anomaly has drawn the immune response. The infection will now be sterilized. Greater than. The being, soulless, floated down until it was hovering 100 feet above the ruined city square where Naruto, Erza, and Mirajane stood. Its faceless head tilted, looking at them. Less than I am soulless. The custodian of realities. The balancer of the cosmic scales. Greater than. Natsu, a few blocks away, finally broke the mental paralysis through sheer force of will. Custodian of my left foot. You're just another bad guy who needs his butt kicked. He shot towards the being on a pillar of flame. Fire dragons. He never finished the attack. Soulless raised a single, elegant finger. Natsu and his flames were frozen in midair, a foot from the being. Less than primitive. The laws of thermodynamics in this universe are so pliable. Greater than. With a flick of its finger, Natsu was sent hurtling back to the ground, crashing into a street with enough force to shatter the cobblestones, unconscious. Less than you do not understand. Greater than Soulless's voice continued, a chilling lack of emotion in its tone. Less than this is not an invasion. It is a surgical procedure. Your world has been contaminated. Greater than. Its attention focused solely on Naruto. Less than BYU. Greater than. Me, Naruto growled, stepping forward. Less than you are a transcendent. A being whose very nature is of a reality beyond this one. Your energy, this, chakra, is a foreign law. It infects the very fabric of this universe, causing a decay so subtle, so slow, that you could not perceive it in 1,000 lifetimes. But I perceive it. I am the guardian against such things. I have observed countless universes wither and die from your kind of infection. Greater than. The being gestured with one hand to a section of the city that was still intact. Less than allow me to demonstrate. Greater than. A beam of pale, colorless light shot from its palm. It struck a large clock tower in the distance. There was no explosion, no sound. The clock tower, a structure that had stood for centuries, simply ceased to be. It was not destroyed, it was erased. One moment it was there, the next, it was gone, leaving a perfect, tower-shaped hole in the sky. The horror of the act was absolute. This was not a power to be fought. It was the power to unmake reality itself. Less than I am not a monster. I am a cure. Greater than Soulless stated, its voice resonating with unshakable conviction. Less than your bonds. Your emotions, your very existence, they are all symptoms of the disease. I will cleanse this world. And then I will move on to the next infected reality. It is my purpose, my eternal, unchanging duty. Greater than. It turned its full attention back to Naruto. Less than but I am not without a sense of efficiency. The infection is concentrated in you. Cooperate. Erase yourself from this existence. And I will spare this planet its full sterilization. Resist, and I will unmake every last atom of it to ensure the contamination does not spread. The choice is yours. Greater than. An ultimatum. His life, weighed against the fate of an entire world. It was a cruel, Impossible choice, designed to break his spirit. Erza stood beside him, her sword drawn, her body trembling slightly, not from fear, but from rage. Mirajane floated at his other side, her demonic energy flaring, her expression one of cold fury. Lucy, having seen Natsu fall, was staring at the godlike being with a mixture of terror and defiance. Naruto looked at his friends. He looked at the city this being was willing to erase. He thought of the quiet moments in Lucy's apartment, the shared understanding with Erza, the gentle acceptance of Mirajane. He thought of the loud, chaotic, beautiful family that had taken him in. His philosophy, his entire life, was built on the foundation of never giving up, of protecting his precious people. Solus saw bonds as a sickness. Naruto knew they were the source of all true strength. He looked up at the faceless god from the rift, and for the first time since its arrival, he smiled. It was a sharp, defiant grin. "You know, I've met a few people who thought they were gods," Naruto said, his voice ringing out in the sudden silence. They all had one thing in common. He raised his left hand, and a sphere of pure, black nothingness, a truth-seeking orb, materialized above his palm, effortlessly absorbing the oppressive aura that Solus was emitting. He molded it into a long, black staff. The world around him seemed to snap back into focus as his own divine, reality-defining power asserted itself. "They all made the mistake of underestimating us," he finished, his blue eyes blazing with the golden light of the six paths. Less than a foolish choice. Greater than. No," Naruto said, spinning the staff in his hand. "It's the only choice." He shot forward, a streak of gold and black against the ruined city. Solus met his charge, a tendril of its own void-like energy extending to meet him. The black staff of nothingness met the tendril of uncreation in the sky above Harjan. There was no sound. There was only a silent, terrible flash of light and a shockwave that warped the very air, bending space and reality around the two colliding anomalies. The true battle for the fate of Earth-Land had begun. Chapter 8 End. Chapter 9. The Unbreakable Vow. The clash between Naruto and Solus was not a battle of magic or chakra. It was a war of concepts, a struggle between two beings whose very existence represented a different set of universal laws. Where they fought, the world grew unstable. Colors bled, gravity fluctuated, and the air crackled with the raw, untamed energy of creation and uncreation. Naruto moved like a golden comet, the truth-seeking staff an extension of his will. He was faster, stronger, and more experienced in raw combat than the cosmic entity. He fought with the honed instincts of a lifetime warrior. Each strike precise, each movement a masterpiece of deadly efficiency. He was trying to end this quickly, to force Solus into a defensive position and create an opening. Solus, however, did not fight like a warrior. It was a force of nature. It did not dodge, it simply warped space, causing Naruto's attacks to pass harmlessly through where it had been a nanosecond before. It did not block, it erected fields of null energy that erased his attacks from existence upon contact. For every blistering offensive Naruto launched, Solus responded with a calm, effortless negation. Less than your struggles are futile, anomaly, greater than its voice echoed in their minds, serene and condescending. Less than you fight with the limited logic of a physical being. I am a law. You cannot punch a law into submission. Greater than. To prove its point, Solus extended a hand. The ground beneath Naruto, the very cobblestones and earth, simply ceased to exist, leaving a perfect, 50-foot sphere of absolute nothingness. Naruto, caught by surprise, used his staff to push off the edge of the void, launching himself back into the air, his eyes wide. This was not a power to be overwhelmed by force. It was a power that had to be outthought. Down below, the rest of Fairy Tail could only watch in horrified awe. The scale of the conflict was beyond their comprehension. "We have to do something," Gray yelled, dodging a stray ripple of spatial distortion that momentarily turned the air around him to liquid. "We can't just let him fight that thing alone." "But what can we do?" Lucy cried out, helping a dazed Natsu to his feet. "Our magic. It's like throwing pebbles at a hurricane." Erza watched the battle in the sky, her mind racing, her strategic sense pushed to its absolute limit. Lucy was right. A direct magical assault would be useless. Solus would simply unmake it. They couldn't fight its power, but perhaps they could fight its focus. It sees Naruto as the primary threat, the source of the infection, Erza said. Her voice sharp and clear, cutting through the panic. Its attention is completely focused on him. It perceives the rest of us as symptoms, irritations. That is its mistake. That is our opening. Mirajane, hovering beside her, her demonic form radiating a fierce, protective energy, understood instantly. It thinks Naruto is the only one who matters. So we remind it that he is not alone. A new resolve settled over the three women. Their individual fears, their feelings, were secondary now. What mattered was the bond between them, and the man they had all come to love who was fighting for their world. Lucy, Erza commanded, I need a distraction. Something big, something bright. Draw its attention, even for a second. Mirajane, she continued, turning to the she-devil. We're going to hit it with everything we have. Not to destroy it, but to disrupt the laws it's imposing. We're going to give Naruto the chaos he needs. Their eyes met, a perfect triad of understanding. This was not a plan born of logic, but of pure, desperate faith. Faith in Naruto, and faith in each other. Lucy didn't hesitate. She knew exactly what to do. It was a gamble, a move it would drain nearly all her magical energy, but there was no other choice. She raised 3 golden keys into the air. Open, gate of the water bearer, Aquarius. Open, gate of the golden bull, Taurus. Open, gate of the lion, Leo. In 3 brilliant flashes of light, her most powerful spirits appeared. The grumpy, powerful mermaid, the mighty, axe-wielding minotaur, and the king of the zodiac. It was a massive drain. And she immediately felt dizzy, but she held the gates open through sheer force of will. All of you, she yelled, pointing towards the sky. Combined attack. Target the big, shiny jerk. Now, Aquarius unleashed a colossal tidal wave. Loke fired a full-power Regulus impact, and Taurus swung his giant axe, sending a wave of pure force into the air. The 3 attacks, a maelstrom of water, light, and power, converged into a single, massive projectile and shot towards Solus. The cosmic being, in the middle of erasing one of Naruto's shadow clones, barely registered the attack. Less than irrelevant, greater than it projected. Raising a hand to simply nullify the combined magical assault. But that single, dismissive gesture was the opening Erza and Mirajane were waiting for. In the instant Solus's attention was diverted. They struck. Requip. Nakagami armor. Erza roared. A tidal wave of magical power erupted from her, and she was clad in the legendary, magic-dispelling armor, a beautiful and ornate suit that consumed vast amounts of magical energy to wear. Wielding its halberd, which could cut through space and magic itself, she launched herself into the air. At the same time, Mirajane's body was engulfed in darkness. Satan's soul. Citri. She unleashed her most powerful, most terrifying form, the demonic power she had once feared, now a weapon of righteous fury. They didn't attack Solus directly. They attacked the space around it. Erza's halberd slashed through the air, and for a moment, the absolute law of Solus's power was severed. Mirajane fired a blast of pure demonic energy, not at Solus, but at the point where Erza had cut, flooding the temporary vacuum with a chaotic, primal magic that was anathema to Solus's sterile sense of order. The result was an explosion of conceptual static. For a single, crucial second, Solus's perfect control over the battlefield was shattered. The laws of reality it had been imposing flickered, and the fundamental rules of the world, gravity, momentum, energy, snapped back into place. Naruto felt it instantly. The constant, oppressive pressure of Solus's reality warping vanished, replaced by the familiar physics of a normal fight. Chi was the opening he had been waiting for, an opening he couldn't have made himself, an opening that could only have been created by the trust and power of his friends. He didn't waste it. He formed a recentricon in his hand. The microscopic wind blades of the attack screaming, a weapon designed not just to cut the body, but to sever energy pathways at a cellular level. But he didn't throw it. He held it, pouring every ounce of his own 6-path sage energy into it, condensing it, making it smaller, denser, more potent, until it was a miniature, raging star of destructive power in his palm. He shot towards the momentarily disoriented Solus, his target not its body, but its core, the central point from which it projected its power. Solus sensed the danger too late. It had dismissed the others as gnats, and in its arrogance, had failed to comprehend the power of their synergy. It tried to reassert its control, to unmake the incoming attack, but Naruto was already there. "This is for our family," he roared, slamming the condensed Rasenshuriken into the being's chest. The impact was silent, but the release of energy was absolute. Billions of microscopic wind blades, each infused with an energy that was a law unto itself, tore through Solus's form. It didn't explode. It began to unravel, its perfect, geometric body glitching and distorting as two opposing universal laws fought for dominance within its very being. Less than logical. Impossibility. Greater than the entity projected, its voice for the first time laced with something akin to confusion, to pain. Less than the symptoms, attacking the cure, a paradox, greater than. Its form flickered violently, its connection to the rift, its power source, severed by the internal chaos of the Rasenshuriken. It was wounded, vulnerable, for the first time since it had manifested. But it was not defeated. With a final, desperate exertion of will, it focused its remaining power, not on Naruto, but on the ones who had made this possible. It identified the three women, Erza, Mirajane, and Lucy, as the source of the paradox, the illogical variable that had led to its injury. Its faceless head turned towards them, and a beam of pure, concentrated erasure shot from its core. The attack was faster than anything they could dodge. It was the dying curse of a wounded god, an attack designed to wipe them from existence. Naruto saw it coming. He was too far away to intercept it. A raw, primal fear, colder and sharper than any he had ever felt, shot through him. He was about to watch his new life, his new hope, be erased before his eyes. But the three women, exhausted and drained as they were, saw it too. And in that final, terrifying moment, they did not scatter. They did not try to flee. They moved together. Erza, her Nakagami armor crumbling from the energy expenditure, planted her feet. Mirajane, her sea-tree form flickering, landed beside her. Lucy, her magic almost completely gone, stumbled to stand with them. They stood shoulder to shoulder, a defiant line of three, facing down the end of everything. And as they braced for the impact, they all looked towards Naruto. Their eyes met across the battlefield, and in that shared gaze, a universe of emotion was conveyed. Love, trust, defiance, a promise of a future that was now about to be stolen from them. In the midst of the chaos, in the split second before the beam of oblivion reached them, with the fate of the world hanging in the balance, Naruto's voice rang out, not as a shout, but as a clear, unwavering vow that seemed to resonate with the very soul of the world. Erza, Mira, Lucy, I swear, on everything I am, we will have a future together. I will build us a home. I will be your family. I will marry you, all of you. It was a desperate, heartfelt, and utterly insane declaration. A marriage proposal in the face of annihilation. A promise of life screamed into the teeth of the void. And that promise, that vow, became a power all its own. As the beam of erasure was about to hit them, the raw, untamed magical energy of Earth-land itself seemed to respond to the sheer emotional force of their bond. A golden light, warm and brilliant, erupted from the three women. It was not their own magic. It was something deeper, something more primal. It was the power of their connection, their love, given form. The light swirled around them, forming a perfect, golden sphere. Their bond, solidified by Naruto's vow, had become its own law of reality, a concept as fundamental as Solus's sterile order. The law of love, of family. The beam of uncreation struck the golden sphere, and shattered against it. The pure, nihilistic energy of the void could not erase something so real, so powerful. The golden light of their bond held firm, a testament to a strength that the cosmic entity could never comprehend. Solus, its last ounce of power spent, its form almost completely unraveled, could only project one final, disbelieving thought. Less than, incorrect. Greater than. With that, its form dissolved completely, and the great, weeping wound in the sky above hardened slowly, finally, began to stitch itself closed. As the violet light of the rift faded, a profound silence fell over the ruined city. The surviving rift fiends dissolved into dust. The oppressive, alien pressure was gone. Naruto stood panting in the sky, his body aching, his chakra reserves scraped dry. He looked down at the three women, who were now slumping to the ground. The golden sphere of light having faded, their energy completely spent. They were alive. They were safe. He flew down to them, landing gently in their midst. They looked up at him. Their faces smudged with dirt and tears, their bodies trembling with exhaustion. No one spoke. The weight of what had just happened, of the vow he had made, hung between them. He looked from Erza's stunned but relieved face, to Mirajane's tear-streaked but smiling one, to Lucis' utterly exhausted but shining eyes. He had made a promise in the face of death. Now, in the quiet aftermath of their victory, he had to face the reality of it. He reached out his hand, and the three of them, without hesitation, placed their hands in his. Their vow was unbreakable. Their future, hard-won and utterly insane, had just begun. Chapter 9 End. Chapter 10. A new dawn, a new family. The journey back to Magnolia was a surreal procession. The members of Fairy Tale, bruised, battered, and utterly exhausted, moved through the scarred streets of Harjan in a state of stunned silence. The citizens they had saved lined the streets, their faces filled with a mixture of awe, gratitude, and a healthy dose of fear for the people who had fought a god and won. Natsu, now conscious but nursing a headache of celestial proportions, was uncharacteristically quiet, his gaze often drifting to the four figures at the head of the procession. Naruto, Erza, Mirajane, and Lucy walked together, a small bubble of charged intimacy in the midst of their weary comrades. The vow, spoken in the heat of a reality-bending battle, was a tangible thing between them. It was a source of quiet strength, a deep well of unspoken emotion, and a terrifyingly large question mark hanging over their future. They hadn't spoken of it. They didn't need to. The looks they shared, the way they instinctively moved closer to one another, said everything. When they finally arrived back at the guild hall, they were not met with the wrath of the Magic Council, but with a scene of frantic activity. Mages from other guilds, Blue Pegasus, Lamia Scale, even Sabretooth, were there, helping to clear the rubble from the previous battle, their faces grim. Jura Nikis, one of the 10 wizard saints, stood waiting for them at the entrance. Master Makarov, Jura said, bowing his head respectfully, his voice a low, serious rumble. We received word. We saw the sky tear open over Harjan. The council is in chaos. Councilwoman Yilva's advisor has vanished, and with him, all evidence of his existence. Her credibility is shattered. The entire political landscape has been upended. Makarov surveyed the scene, his eyes landing on the exhausted but whole forms of his children. A deep, relieved sigh escaped him. The real threat is gone, Jura. For now. The story of the Battle of Harjan spread like wildfire, not as a factual report, but as a myth, a legend. A story of how Fairy Tale, branded as outlaws, had single-handedly saved a sea tie from an otherworldly invasion that the council had been powerless to stop. Public opinion, a fickle but powerful force, swung violently in their favor. The warrants were quietly rescinded. The bounty was lifted. They were no longer outlaws. They were heroes. In the days that followed, a new normal began to take shape. The guild was rebuilt, stronger and more boisterous than ever. The threat of solace, while not forgotten, was relegated to the status of a nightmare from which they had all, blessedly, awoken. But for Naruto, Erza, Mirajane, and Lucy, the world had fundamentally changed. Their shared experience, their shared victory, and their shared vow had woven their lives together into a single, intricate tapestry. The question was no longer if, but how. The conversation happened on a quiet evening. On the hill overlooking Magnolia, the same hill where Lizana's grave marker stood. It was Mirajane who had chosen the spot, a place of memory and rebirth. They sat on the grass, the lights of the city twinkling below them. The vast, star-filled sky above a peaceful canvas now, no longer a source of dread. So, Lucy began, her voice small, breaking the comfortable silence. We probably need to talk about it. The proposal, Mirajane said, her tone gentle, but with an underlying current of nervousness. Erza, ever direct, looked straight at Naruto. Did you mean it? What you said, in the heat of the battle? It wasn't an accusation, but a genuine question. She needed to know if it was a desperate cry or a true declaration. Naruto looked at the three of them, his heart, for the first time in his life, feeling completely, utterly calm. He had spent his life chasing a dream, fighting for a home. He had found it, not in a place, but in people. In them. "I've never been more serious about anything in my life," he said, his voice resonating with an unshakable sincerity. He looked at Lucy. "You showed me the joy in small moments, the warmth of a simple, peaceful day. You reminded me what it was we were fighting for." He turned to Erza. "You understood the weight I carried without me having to say a word. You saw the warrior in me, and you weren't afraid of it. You stood as my shield. And you taught me that strength and vulnerability can be the same thing." Finally, he looked at Mirajane. "You saw the lonely kid behind the monster. You accepted the darkest parts of me, and in doing so, you gave me the courage to accept them myself. You healed wounds I didn't even know I had." He took a deep breath, his gaze encompassing all three of them. "I don't know how this is supposed to work. My world, this world, there are no rules for this. But I know that my life, my future, it's unimaginable without any of you in it. The vow I made, it was the truest thing I've ever said. I love you, all of you." Tears welled in Lucy's eyes. A rare, beautiful smile bloomed on Erza's face. And Mirajane's gentle expression was one of pure, unadulterated happiness. "We love you too, Naruto," Lucy whispered, speaking for all of them. "But how?" Erza began, the practical, logical part of her brain trying to grapple with the unprecedented reality of their situation. "A marriage, between four people. We'll make our own rules," Mirajane said, her voice filled with a quiet confidence. "Our family has never been conventional. Why should our love be any different?" And so, they did. The wedding was not a grand affair. It was not a state ceremony or a lavish party. It was a fairy tale party, which meant it was chaotic, heartfelt, and involved a significant amount of property damage. It took place in the newly rebuilt guild hall. There was no priest, no formal officiant. Master Makarov stood on a small, hastily built stage, a wide, proud grin on his face. Erza wore a simple but elegant white dress, her scarlet hair a stunning contrast. She had foregone her armor for the day, a testament to the profound sense of safety she felt. Mirajane wore a flowing, ethereal gown that made her look like a celestial being, her white hair adorned with small, delicate flowers. Lucy wore a dress that was both beautiful and practical, a reflection of her own spirit, her Cele's teal keys still tied proudly at her waist. Naruto stood between them, not in a formal tuxedo, but in a custom-made black and orange haori, the Uzumaki swirl on the back proudly displayed next to the Range Fairy Tale Guild mark on his shoulder. He looked at the three women who stood with him, his partners, his family, and a feeling of profound peace settled over him. His journey had been one of pain, of loss, of being thrown across the very fabric of reality. But it had led him here. It had led him home. Ahem. Makarov cleared his throat, his voice booming over the cheering guild members. "We are gathered here today to celebrate a bond unlike any this world has ever seen. A bond forged in battle, tempered by understanding, and sealed by a love that defies all convention." He looked at the four of them, his eyes twinkling with unshed tears. "There are no ancient vows for a moment like this. So, we will make our own." He turned to the guild. "Do you, the family of Fairy Tale, take these four knuckleheads in all their weirdness and power, and promise to always support them, drink with them, and fight alongside them?" "Aye, sir." The entire guild roared as one, mugs held high. "Good enough for me," Makarov declared with a laugh. He looked at Naruto, Erza, Mirajane, and Lucy. "I now pronounce you, well, you figure it out. You're married." A deafening cheer erupted. Natsu shot a loom of fire into the air that singed a newly installed banner. Gray, in his excitement, had somehow already lost his shirt. Kana chugged an entire barrel of ale in their honor. In the midst of the joyful chaos, Naruto, Erza, Mirajane, and Lucy stood together, their hands joined. They didn't kiss. Instead, they leaned in, their foreheads touching, creating a small, quiet circle of their own. Naruto looked at his new wives, his family. He was no longer a Jinchuriki, a savior, or an anomaly. He was a husband. He was home. The future was uncertain. There would be other threats, other battles. The hum of the void had been silenced. But the memory of it was a reminder that their universe was larger and more complex than they had ever imagined. But as he stood there, surrounded by the warmth of his new family, he knew they could face anything. He had arrived in this world a maelstrom of loss and power. Now, he was an anchor, a center point for a new and powerful kind of family. The boy who as once reviled and alone had found a love that spanned worlds, a love that had defied a god. It was a new dawn, and for the first time, Naruto Uzumaki's sky was filled with stars. Chapter 10 End.